All to your right, if you haven't already identified that, I ask that you please turn your cell phones off so that we don't have, or at least to vibrate. Staff and council turns them off so we don't have any feedback with the audio equipment. So I will call this meeting to order and ask for a roll call, please.
Councilmember Hall?
Here.
Councilmember Moeller?
Here.
Councilmember Dornbecker?
Here.
Vice Mayor Chilton?
Here.
Mayor Dunbar?
Here. If you are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And if I could ask our visiting Eagle Scout candidate to maybe lead us, Jack Huber. Thank you, Jack. Didn't mean to spring that on you, but we'll be hearing from Jack in just a few minutes also. Moving on, closed session report. Do we have any closed session? I hope not, because our attorney is not here to tell us that. All right. We'll move on to adoption of the agenda, item 5. Are there any corrections or changes to tonight's agenda? If not, is there a motion to adopt that?
Move to adopt agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now we'll move on to public comment. So this is an opportunity for any member of the public who would like to speak on a subject that is not listed on tonight's agenda. Now would be the time to do so. Looks like we do not have anyone coming forward, so we'll move on from public comment right on to item 7, the consent calendar. Are there any questions, concerns, or is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar items?
Move to approve the consent calendar.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. And I just wanted to point out that item 7B, the League of California Cities delegates that we just appointed, that will be, I will be the primary delegate, and Councilmember Moeller will be the first alternate, and also Councilmember Dornbecker is going to be going to that league conference in September also, so we'll be well represented. All right, moving on. As I said, we have presentations now, item 8, and the first one is a presentation by Eagle Scout candidate who's representing the Eagle Scouts in a proposed townwide project to paint fire hydrants, and I'd like to invite our Public Works Director, Graham Wadsworth, to introduce our Eagle Scout candidate.
All right, thank you. Good evening, Mayor Dunbar, Town Council. Jack, if you come up to the podium. Jack Huber is a student at Justin Siena, and he's a Life Scout at this time, and we've been working with the Boy Scouts to do a volunteer project here in the town. So he'd like to make a presentation about that and get your approval to move forward with this project. He's prepared a PowerPoint presentation, and we'll just click through that, and when you're ready.
Sure. Great, welcome.
So my Eagle Scout project will be repainting your town's fire hydrants because most of them are not the regulation color of silver. It's like this. And so what an Eagle project basically is, as a Life Scout, I have to lead and plan and develop this project, and it has to be a service to the community. And so I've chosen this project because it will benefit the town of Yountville, and I have this PowerPoint, and I'm slowly developing it, and I will lead the Scouts third on the day that I execute my project. Next slide, please. And so Yountville has a total of like 60 or so fire hydrants, but 48 of them are not the regulation color of silver or chrome. And so by repainting these fire hydrants, they will meet the regulations for your town and CAL FIRE. And then during an emergency, the fire department will be able to notice it easier. I think, are you doing reflective paint as well? Mm-hmm. And so that will benefit the fire department, and it'll kind of bring the community together a little more, and it'll look nice. So here are some examples. The one on the left obviously needs to be repainted because it's not the regulation color, and I hope to have all the fire hydrants look like that example on the right. And so my budget will be about $300. And that will be for paint. We'll have about like 3 or 4 gallons of paint. Tarps to prevent splatters or messes, which will be going around the fire hydrants. We'll have brushes to paint the fire hydrants with. The gas money for the Public Works Department vehicles to transport supplies and things of that nature. And then the overtime costs for the Public Works staff. And then items I'm borrowing from Public Works Department would be mostly safety items like traffic cones, the safety vests, and like wet paint signs and things like that. So what I'm hoping to do is to coordinate with Public Works Department to have them power wash the fire hydrants during the week before I paint them. And then scouts from my troop, Troop 83, will come in and I'll help lead them and paint them. And so every scout will need the items on the budget, which include the safety vest, brushes, paint, tarps, and then the traffic cones and wet paint signs. And so I'll be working with the Public Works Department on the day of my project to help distribute these supplies to the scouts before I send them out and supervise them. So I've divided up the town of Yountville into about 10 sections, and each section is going to have about 5 fire hydrants, which scouts will be responsible for. And I hope to have teams which include like about 2 Boy Scouts and then a parent to drive them around and supervise them. And I think it'll take leaning more toward 2 weekend days to paint the body silver and then the top screen. So before I send the scouts out into the town, I'm going to use a fire hydrant as an example to show them how to paint it, how to put the tarp down, things like that. And then throughout, as I said before, throughout the project, I'll just have them, I'll supervise the scouts and help distribute supplies and things like that. Does anybody have any questions for me about my project?
Does council have any questions? Mr. Huber?
No question.
I just wanted to ask Steve, our town manager, is there a specific process you need from us, or are you going to basically help with Graham and supervising from the town's perspective?
2 things. One is we felt as part of the council's strategic goal input where you've asked for us to help identify and work on ways for volunteerism, that this is a good example to showcase that. In Graham's staff report, he did mention that we have resources within our supplies budget. While the project may not have been specifically identified, we're able within the budget to accommodate the well-detailed itemized costs that Jack has gone through within the Public Works maintenance and supply budget and within the overtime budget.
And I feel that if, this project has been well organized and planned, and unless there's any objections, would sign the application for his Eagle rank, which then he gets approval from his Scoutmaster and also the Eagle Counselor, and then he can move forward with scheduling the dates, and we'll work with the crews on doing that. So if there's no objections, we'll move forward.
And what I would also say is we don't have this on our work plan to do this year. So, I mean, this is a good example of identifying something that's on a potential to-do list that adds value to the community that we otherwise would not be doing ourselves this year.
Well, I'll just kind of speak maybe on behalf of the council and myself that I appreciate the initiative that you're taking to reach out to Yountville and help us with a project that will benefit from, as obviously you're motivated because of the ability to get credit for this, but we benefit from it also, the whole community does. So thank you for thinking of us.
Thank you.
And I know I'm just kind of looking around to make sure that I'm seeing all nodding heads that we're in agreement that we think this is going to be a really great project for you to take on. I'm very impressed with how organized you are, and look forward to you and your fellow scouts coming up and taking care of this. So, are there any other comments from the council?
I have one question.
Councilmember Muller.
Yes.
What's your approximate time frame? Are you going to do this next month or 6 months from now, or what are you thinking?
I'm hoping to finish this like August or September. I'm looking at because I want to beat the rain.
Okay, good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. And I'm sure we'll hear as a date certain gets set that we'll be able to keep our eyes out for you. And on behalf of CAL FIRE, also thank you for helping get us up to proper code for the colors, and really appreciate that. So thank you very much, Mr. Huber.
Thank you,
Thank
John.
you. Thank you, Jack.
We will move on to our next presentation, which is a presentation by Sustainable Napa County regarding Napa County Energy Watch and Energy Upgrade.
Do I need the mouse to advance? I got the lesson earlier.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's so nice to be here. I was looking at the agenda when we came in, and there's so many great things on your agenda. This is fun. You guys are doing lots of fun stuff, and it's nice to see, too, the methane gas project and the EPR resolution later. So lots of wonderful things going on in Yountville, so you should be commended.
And if I could just ask you for the record and our viewing audience, if you could just identify yourself.
My name is Jerry Gill, and I am the CEO of Sustainable Napa County. And I am here tonight with some colleagues and co-workers and partners. Sally Seymour, who is our Sustainable Napa County Project Manager. Bill Bennett, who is our Sustainable Napa County and Napa County Energy Watch Project Engineer. And then we also have Steve the Letterer, who is a familiar face to many of you. He's the Director of the Department of Environmental Management for the County of Napa. And he is the lead on one of the programs that we're talking about tonight, Energy Upgrade California. So we're all here as a team. I'll be making the presentation, but then after we're finished, if you have any specific questions, especially about engineering, if you have an engineering question, that's when I sit down really quick and Bill comes up and talks about stuff. So you all have the PowerPoint presentation. So one of my goals in life is to not read my PowerPoint slides, and I try not to do that. So I'm going to give you some more information other than what you find in your handouts. So paying attention to the already built environment is really the focus of the two programs that we're going to talk to you about tonight. Especially in Napa County, this is really important because of our really innovative land use and planning policies that we have in place. And the already built environment is something that we feel is the biggest opportunity here in Napa County. Many of you are aware of the community-wide climate action framework, where we did the inventory of our greenhouse gas emissions. And in Napa County, under that framework, the residential and commercial buildings account for about 35% of our emissions. And under the business as usual strategy by 2020, that's going to be somewhere around 41%. So it's a pretty big chunk of our greenhouse gas emissions. The programs we're discussing today will help with reaching our greenhouse gas emission reduction targets, but they'll also help with the public policy and leadership goals that we know you have in place. Clearly, as evidenced by your agenda tonight, you're doing great things here in the town of Yountville. We're very impressed. And this is just another way to get into your residential and business sectors with some information. It also helps our community save resources, and not just the natural resources that we were talking about, energy and water, but also financial resources. So the two programs we're talking about tonight are Napa County Energy Watch, Energy Upgrade California, which is a pretty new program. It's a statewide program, and I'm going to talk more in detail about that. And then last, we're going to ask you for some help and some advice on how we can reach into your community and get the information out. So put your thinking caps on. So who are we? Many of you know who Sustainable Napa County is and what we do. We were started by the Gasser Foundation in 2007. We became a fully fledged nonprofit about 3 years ago. But in addition to our goals around energy efficiency and locally produced and generated renewable energy and recycling and waste reduction, one of the other key roles that we seek to play is to convene and collaborate, and also to take policies, programs, things that are happening at maybe the federal or state level, and really scale them down and translate them so that we can put them in place in our community, make them really relevant here, and then also get stakeholders and partners and people who should be involved in an issue so that we can make it work in our own backyard. So the first program is our Energy Watch program. Energy Watch is a partnership between Sustainable Napa County and Pacific Gas and Electric, and it is authorized by the California Public Utilities Commission. There are other what they call local government partnerships throughout PG&E's service territory in northern and central California. They are funded by the public purpose surcharge. If you read your utility bills, and I know you all do, as soon as you get them, you tear them open and you look up and down and make sure that all the details there. But on the back, there's a line item that's the public goods or the public purpose program, and that is the programs that fund energy efficiency programs. Some of that comes to Energy Watch programs throughout the territory. Our key target groups are, as listed, the municipal, nonprofit, small business, and then also residential. Our contract is for 3 years. It's not a grant. It is a performance-based contract, and we have a goal of reducing kilowatt hours in Napa County by 3.6 million. Which is a lot. And when we first got that number, our eyes were wide for about 3 days. But it's actually, as I'll tell you in a minute, coming together quite nicely. The services we provide range from free energy use evaluations all the way through to referring folks to specialized PG&E resources. We know that PG&E is a huge organization. It's very helpful. They have lots of resources, but sometimes they can be very hard to find. So Sustainable Napa County, through Napa County Energy Watch, is really your local advocate and also your local researcher and finder of information and connector to all the things that are available to governments and to businesses and to residents through PG&E, trying to put those to work, again, in our community. A lot of the things that we do align with the Napa County Green Business Program. So if you're looking to be a certified green business, going through an audit that we provide for free will set you on the course to getting that part checked off of your certification list and, in fact, may even exceed those in some cases. And then the other thing that it does is it helps streamline the process for you or for the applicant. These Napa County Energy Watch team will shepherd the whole rebate process, so you're saving money, but you're also saving time because, again, we know that it can sometimes be complicated. So all those things are taken care of for the customer. So our focus, as I mentioned, small business, nonprofit, municipal, and special districts. We've done some work here in Yountville. I think we have 7 or 8 sites that we've audited and that we've put into the rebate system. We also identify other opportunities that are available, as I mentioned, connecting with other resources. The other thing that's interesting about this is we're learning connecting customers with available rebates now, but also giving them enough information so that they are being helped in their long and even longer term planning. So they know the right questions to ask a vendor. They know the kind of things to look for when they're looking to replace equipment. So if something blows up or breaks, they're not making a decision under urgent circumstances without any information. So they know kind of what refrigerator or HVAC system to take a look at. So trying to set them up with as much information as possible. So even if the capital isn't available right now, when it is, they're doing the right thing and getting the right equipment. We also connect customers to on-bill financing, which is something that you're very familiar with or will be quite shortly. We, again, work with other PG&E departments to make sure that we're connecting all the dots. And so how we're doing so far, I am going to read this part because we're very proud of it. About 18 months into our contract, we're about 1.8 million kilowatt hours under and done. And so we just have the 3.6 million in the next year and a half, and we're really well on our way of getting there. We have 150 facilities evaluated and completed. It's about $250,000 a year in savings, annual savings for these customers, so that's going to keep happening. And also 500 tons of greenhouse gas emissions reduced in our county. And so that's something that we're very excited about too, because again, it aligns with all the other things that our community's doing, climate action plans, sustainability planning. It really does help serve those goals as well. So residential customers, kind of a broad audience, sometimes hard to reach. But we are working with local community groups, chambers of commerce, nonprofits, the realtors, and then North Bay Association of Realtors, service clubs. We're making presentations. We're making a presentation to the Kiwanis Club here next week. So really trying to get the word out. We're also working through our nonprofit organizations to reach their customer and client communities with information about these programs that can help save them money. Often they are lower or moderate income folks who could really use the extra disposable income at the end of the month month. And so this is one way that we're reaching those folks with trusted resources through a nonprofit that they're already working with. We're also, again, developing other programs that align with the things that you're already doing. A good example is the High Performance Building Ordinance in the City of Napa. I know you have green building ordinances here, so it really does align quite well. A couple of other things for low-income customers, just briefly. The CARE program, which is for low-income folks, a rate reduction, but also an energy savings assistance program, which used to be called Energy Partners, for free. Energy Watch will come in and have a contractor come in and replace weather stripping, microwaves, doors, windows, help with insulation, and it's all at no cost to folks who are income qualified, and that's really nice, again, for those folks who could use a little bit of extra money, but it also increases their indoor air quality. It makes that a healthier place to live, healthier place to work. So for everybody else, there's Energy Upgrade California. Energy Upgrade California is really an unprecedented alliance between California counties, cities, nonprofits, the investor-owned utilities, Pacific Gas and Electric is one of those, and the private investor-owned and the public-owned utilities. Its goals are to help residential and commercial consumers and the building industry become knowledgeable about the many efficiency programs and rebates available, provide a consistent and clear message regarding how consumers can choose the best energy efficiency measures for them and the right contractors, drive consumers and contractors to a central resource that provides educational information linking all the state efficiency programs together, and then also educating the building and the building trades and the home improvement industry on jobs, training, and other required certifications. So there's a lot of benefits to this program. Who is eligible? Any homeowner. For the two programs, the basic and the advanced, any homeowner is eligible. You don't really have to do anything special. They don't look at your income. It's just really, if you're doing some energy efficiency upgrades, this is the way to do it. When it comes to energy, they look at the house as a system, and everything has to work together, and they have to be as efficient as possible and also work efficiently together. So this is really how they approach it, called the whole house approach. The basic has the 7 key areas there. It's a $1,000 fixed amount rebate. The advanced is the basic plus. It has some other additional pieces: furnaces, cooling, hot water heaters, cool roofs, windows, wall insulation. And that ranges from $12,000 to $4,000 as a rebate, depending on whatever your project looks like. We talked to some local realtors and some brokers about, what are some of the questions that you have about this program, and one of the things they mentioned to us is that the quality control on contractors, bringing people into your home, how do they know that these are, people who are going to do the job and they can be trusted? And so they do have very rigorous quality control for their programs. You have to be certified. You have to go through a pretty interesting training process and go to some classes. So this is also a great idea for people who are already considering home improvements or upgrades. And so if it's something that you were already doing and you can get a rebate for it that covers 10 to 25% of the cost of the improvement or the upgrade that you're doing, you may as well take advantage of it and save money and energy in the long run. So how does it work? For the basic upgrade and the advanced upgrade, pretty similar steps. For a statewide program with a variety of public and private partners, the website is surprisingly simple and easy to navigate. It's very clear. It walks participants through every step of the process. There is a place on there where you can put in your zip code, and it'll connect you right to the Napa County site for energy upgrade and all of the information that you need to know, as well as connecting with local contractors. While there is, again, is kind of an involved training process, it is really worth the while for a contractor to get involved and to be certified and get on the approved list, just because we know that the demand will drive that, and so we're hoping that more local contractors sign up for this, because we really do feel like this is sort of where the industry is going. People are going to start asking for this, and we'd really love to be able to send local people to local folks. So we are maybe you have some ideas about how to encourage local building trades to get involved in the program. Another companion piece of Energy Upgrade California is what's called the CHF Residential Energy Retrofit Program, CHF for short, and you can see why, because it is the California Rural Home Mortgage Finance Authority Homebuyers Fund. and that's probably the third time I've ever said the whole thing altogether, but we call it CHF for short. It's actually a joint powers authority formed in 1993 with members of the Regional Council of Rural Counties, of which Napa County is a member. The goal is to help homeowners reduce energy consumption and improve their property, so hopefully increase property values. The other goals, again, like energy upgrade, the basic and advanced, is to create jobs and also stimulate the local economy. In Napa County, again, we are a member, so we are eligible, and the income limits on this are pretty sweet, considering, you know, that most of the time it's very much tied to the federal poverty level. The maximum is $136,000 a year, which probably will reach a lot of people in our communities, and so this is a really great opportunity. There is no catch, basically. It's just that when stimulus funds run out, they have to be allocated by a certain date, and so we're kind of running against the clock. I wish their clock was like your clock and ran behind a little bit, but we're only looking at the livability of this program through March 2012, hoping that will be extended, but we're not sure, so we're acting like it's not, and we really want to get people involved before that time. So what's offered, again, like energy upgrade, the basic and advanced, is a comprehensive evaluation. They also use a whole house performance approach. 3% or 0% interest loans for energy efficiency and also renewable energy upgrades. Right now, because they're doing a special with folks who are part of the Regional Council of Rural Counties, we are eligible for the 0% interest loans. And yes, it's 0%, which is 0%. So that's kind of cool. They also have companion grants that can help offset some of the costs, including the home energy audit, which is something that they require. So that's also good news. It all just helps to decrease the size of the loan, and it can be coupled with the basic or the advanced rebates, so you can reduce the size of your loan by $1,000 or $4,000 depending on what it is that you're doing. So the two programs can be used together. There is no upfront cost to the homeowner. The energy savings is verified after project completion, and that's when the homeowner gets the loan check, and that's when the contractor gets paid. So it's a pretty easy process, but something that I think a lot of folks, especially during these times, something that they can use. It's a lot of good news. So how are we making this work? Well, this is one way, talking to folks like you, our policy leaders and opinion leaders in our communities. We're also, again, reaching out to business groups and nonprofits and service clubs. Where we need your help, as I mentioned, we need some advice and some guidance from you on the best ways to reach into your business and your residential community so that we make sure that the folks that live and work here get these tools and resources available and they know that they're around. These are really practical resources that people can put to use, and I think it's something that, again, aligns with your goals and the things that you're already doing. So the other thing that we're here for is to answer any questions that you might have. I know I crammed a lot of information into a very brief PowerPoint, but that is just the kind of the introduction, and we are here. We're local. We're available. You can give us a call at any time if you think of something else. But for this evening, if you have any questions, we've got our team here, and we're happy to help.
Questions from council?
I do
Councilmember
have a
Dornbecker,
question.
please.
Jerry, you may be aware that we have 2 large mobile home parks in our town, and I was wondering, how does this relate? Are they treated just the same way as a residential home anywhere else?
I believe they are. Manufactured and mobile homes are considered single-family residences, so they would be eligible. The other is that PG&E also has a program for mobile homes. So if you'd like more information about that, we could maybe perhaps organize a neighborhood sweep or something and help with that.
That would be, my suggestion would be that they do have, recreation buildings in their parks, and that would be a good way to reach a large group of those homeowners in our town.
And we can also do common area rebates. Yeah, the Energy Assistance Program, the Energy Savings Assistance Program, ESAP. That's the one I was talking about for where they come in and do it all for free. That might be a really good resource for mobile homes, just because typically they may be seniors or folks on a fixed income, and so that is definitely a program that would be put to good use in mobile home parks.
And can you tell me, are zero interest loans available for solar installations?
Energy efficiency upgrades and solar.
Good, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll just ask an extension of that question about condominium or townhomes and how if they don't have individual meters per unit,
Right.
is there something that can be done there? And I need you to, if you could please come up and speak so that you're on the record and
Yeah.
the World Wide Web can hear you as well.
Right. Phil Bennett, Napa County Energy Watch. So your questions are around condominiums for energy upgrade issues?
If individual, whether it be renters or owners of multi-family buildings, that type of thing.
There are different programs depending upon, there's multi-tenant family residences such as apartments that apply separately, and there's a owner's program which we address issues separately through that. If it's condominium owners, that would have to be dependent on the individual unit. Now, you have to separate the association area versus the individual area and address it on a case-by-case basis. And to further add to the question about solar, typically you have to do the energy upgrades first prior to get financing for the solar, which makes good sense. As engineers, you want to do the energy efficiency first, then you put the solar equipment on the roof on top afterwards. So.
Okay,
I do have a
go ahead.
question regarding that. Does that mean that you would replace your heating and air conditioning before you would consider putting solar in?
Not necessarily. It depends upon, once you've reviewed into the things that make sense. There's various things you can do in a residence. You look at your high users first, and just like we do in an industrial application, sometimes HVAC replacement doesn't always make sense at the time.
Thank you.
I wanted to touch back on the free business audits
Yes.
that are available. Are you reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce to connect with all the business community? Is that how that process is working?
Yes, it's one of the avenues. Right now, we've been pretty much focused in the Napa area. We're trying to reach up now to the Up Valley areas. I was just doing some brainstorming in my mind. When we do get up to Yountville, you have a lot of tourism industries in here, so you have a lot of retail. So the lighting is an obvious thing. HVAC maintenance is an obvious thing. And then we have a really good resource through PG&E called Fisher Nickel, which is a restaurant evaluation firm. They do excellent work in evaluating commercial kitchens, and you'd be surprised if they turn up. And we always, if we feel the kitchen is more applicable to their services, we would turn them over. We know what we know, and we know what we don't know. So we try to get the right resource to the right party.
Other questions? Councilmember Hall, it looks like you've got that pensive look on your face.
Well, where to start? You know, I mean, I think it's a great program, and I saw you present at the watershed presentation. So I got a sort of a first blush there. No, I mean, these are great programs. The organization I work with, we just installed a solar field, and it was fulfilled and rebated by both PG&E and the Fed. So I know these monies are there and they're available. I just hope that people are taking advantage of them. I think one of the questions I would have as an individual, you know, I look at my house and what I do at my house, and I can say that I don't have air conditioning, but there are things I know I can be doing to be more efficient with energy. And what would be the first step that an individual like myself would take? Would they reach out to your organization? Would they get on the phone? Would they send an email? How do they do that? How do the people that are watching us and listening to us, how do they reach out? What's the step?
Well, I'll go ahead and answer that. First thing is look at your bill. And then once you've looked at your bill, log into your account and read your meter, your smart meter versus how you use your energy, and that'll pretty much tell you where you're using your energy and what you should be doing first. And there's the PG&E website is a great resource to look at what programs are out there. Pretty much our focus when we say residential, we've been mainly through the low-income programs, the energy upgrade programs, and then commercial. But the philosophy is the same. Know thyself. Know what you're using, and then make some decisions upon looking at that account that tells you how you use your energy on an hour-by-hour basis. We find a lot of mistakes that way for people and how they use energy on commercial, and the same thing applies to homes. When the spa comes on, my favorite is my personal, working for a beer company at one time, I put the old refrigerator in the garage to keep my beer cold. That was not a good decision because that was the worst electric hog of the entire resident was that beer refrigerator. So, yes. Sally Seymour.
Yes, Sally.
Good evening. I'm Sally Seymour with Sustainable Napa County. I have a more simple-minded approach to the question, who do I call? It's not Ghostbusters, if anyone remembers that movie, but two things. One, anytime what we want to encourage people in the community to do is contact us and say, I can't figure this out. Who do I call? Who do I talk to? I don't know where to click on the website. I can't even find the website. So our contact information is at the end of the presentation. I would urge anyone to give us a call or email us anytime. That's what we're here for. The second thing is, with regard to the residential programs, the Energy Upgrade California website, as Jerry mentioned, is extremely user-friendly. And if you go to that website and you type in Napa County, it will direct you to the page that is tailored for Napa County residents, which means it has not only the information about the statewide programs, but also the information about the loan program that's only available to RCRC member counties. So it's a great place to start, but anyone should feel free to contact us anytime. Thank you.
Could you, I'm sorry, could you just audibly give your website and phone number?
The website is www.sustainablenapacounty.org, and the best phone number is probably 707-255-5555, extension 122. And but all three of us are first name, so it would be Sally at sustainablenapacounty.org, Jerry at sustainablenapacounty.org. You get the idea.
Sure.
Anytime.
And I did want to follow up on Councilmember Hall's question. If one goes to the website, and Bill, you were talking about you can evaluate your energy usage, does it have benchmarks there or some way for you to identify this is where I'm really overusing and can have the biggest benefit? Because the layperson isn't necessarily going to know what, your kilowatt hour or whatever, when you start to get technical, what your energy uses are and should be.
This is the non-engineer's answer. This is kind of, did she learn what Bill tried to teach her? PG&E can give you some standard benchmarks for a house of a particular size or type. Here are the typical patterns for energy use, so you can compare yours with sort of a national average. PG&E is actually developing a program that will give you a much more detailed evaluation of your home energy use. It hasn't gone live yet, but I think it's going to be available in the next 6 months or so. And that will enable you to say, my house is 2,000 square feet. I have air conditioning. I don't have air conditioning. How does that compare to other houses in this climate zone? And that should be very useful information.
Any other questions? Steve, did you have a comment? If the whole team's going to show up, you might as well each speak.
Yeah. Steve Lederer, Napa County Environmental Management. I've met most of you, I think. And this comment is really primarily for Mr. Rogers. So I just want to point out that the county is actually putting some amount of money into education and outreach on this program, and that even though most of the work will ultimately be done in the cities, we're not going to ask you to pay a share of that cost.
We should have had you speak first with that information.
Oh, in that case.
And I did want to respond because you did ask of us, how can we help you engage the community, and I'll offer any the council to speak to it, but generally you will find it a little bit challenging. We have a broad demographic, some of whom are not on the web. Some are not as technically savvy or interested as the other communities you might be dealing with. So certainly the Yountville Sun is a reliable resource. Hanging out at Pacific Blues or Bouchon Bakery is a very reliable way of getting in touch with the local community. But also working through the town with our website, with Channel 28. But we do have certain areas in the community don't get Channel 28, or they're just not online. So there's a lot of I'd almost say kind of old school outreach that we're going to need to engage, all the different elements in our population.
And if I may, I'd also like to add that I think the town would certainly be willing to facilitate and communicate and outreach to our business community and host a meeting, provide facility, because I think in our case, we do know our major restaurants, hotels, and retail facilities, and I think in partnership with the chamber, we can send a direct communication, because I think that's where some folks may find from their business standpoint that, if it makes good economic sense to them, in addition to making good sense in general, then that's an opportunity for you to talk more to what's going to interest them, and their bottom line is always a great way to get their interest.
Certainly when the message is free and saves money, that, that perks people's interest, I'd say, and trustworthy, yes. Councilmember Moeller.
Another suggestion is Yountville Days is coming up October 1st. Just about everybody in town turns out, and we have a lot of booths that we'd welcome you to put one up, and you can even enter a float and get everyone's attention. So it really is a way to, just to, come out for the community and put your banner up and let people come over with a glass of wine and have a conversation.
Yeah, I was going to mention, I think, reaching out with, talking to Samantha with our Parks and Rec Director. She's, I'm sure, going to have ideas on how we can either have a energy efficiency event, or I think, as Councilmember Moeller said, reach out to some of our already existing popular community activities. Another place to go would be the Yountville Deli, that I'm sure the Vice Mayor wasn't going to speak to that, but that's, again, even our business community, I'm sure they will be supportive in engaging not only the residents, but the business owners. And it sounds like this is going to potentially really be a cost savings for them as well. So it's not just individual residentials. Vice Mayor, did you?
I think Yountville Days is October 2nd, just so you don't show up.
Chili cook-off.
Chili cook-off is the first, which you can come and taste Yountville Deli chili if you'd like. But don't come on the 1st.
Were there any other ideas or comments from council or staff? Certainly reaching out to Steve and Samantha and Graham and the rest of the town staff, I think we're more than happy to help however we can. No.
You didn't hear. You're not
Yeah.
tired of us yet?
No, benefiting the community, we're never tired of that.
He hears from us a lot. But thank you for your time. We really appreciate it, and your ideas and your guidance. And it sounds like maybe we could circle back, Steve, and maybe put together kind of a mini strategy for Yountville to reach some of our key audiences and start putting those into place. So I loved your idea, too, about the forum and, folks who own businesses probably also live in a house. So this is a great way to reach them with all the information, but we appreciate your time. And again, if you take away nothing else from this presentation, remember that you can call us at any time, except for 2 in the morning. That's when you call Bill. And but we are available to you via email or by phone, so please stay in touch.
And I would just, one last comment I would make is, I know that one thing that has made me hesitant in the past to try new things is the capital outlay part of it. And I think that has scared people away from making changes like solar panels. If you get that word out front and center that you're talking about low or no cost up front, and then you start to see the savings and the rebates and all how financially sound these opportunities are, I think that's going to be key.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good thing to make sure we emphasize. And in fact, I am planning on putting myself through the upgrade program to just see how it works, so that I can speak from experience, and I can either shout how wonderful it is, or I can get irritated and tell them how they can improve it. But I think that it's a good test. So definitely a great addition to the messages.
Great.
Money's always a winner.
Thank you very much.
All right,
for
thank you. Thanks for your
coming
time.
with that message. I think we should turn off the lights for the rest of the meeting. Yes, they're low energy. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on now to item 9, a public hearing, introduction and first reading of ordinance number 400-11, amending the Yountville Municipal Code as it pertains to open space, et cetera. We have a staff report, please.
Thank you. Staff wanted to follow up last month's amendments to the FAR ordinance that the council passed with a related topic of open space, and some of the concerns staff has had associated with applying the current standards, and make some suggestions for amending that standard to address the issues as staff sees them. This is, while we have prepared the attached ordinance number 400-11, this is intended to be an open discussion, and if there are other topics that get brought up that need to be included in the ordinance, we can carry this over and continue it to another meeting, or if you like the ordinance as it's presented, we can move ahead with it tonight as an introduction. Essentially, the issues that staff has had in the past with the open space ordinance, there are three areas that we're addressing. One of them is the requirement itself, and we're talking about commercial development here, not residential. The commercial standard for open space is 25% in all of the commercial areas. And the current definition talks about providing this as usable open space, which are unenclosed and usable to shoppers, visitors, and general public, and shall be appropriately scaled to allow sufficient sunlight. And I'm reading the ordinance right now. All such open space areas shall be, in addition to walkways adjacent to town streets, all commercial open space shall be visually accessible to the public and should not require entry into a building for its sole access. Most open space should be physically accessible to the public. Well, and I'll get into some clarifications that are also necessary with that definition in a minute, but right now I'd like to get back to the requirement of 25%. We have found to be very difficult and almost unattainable to achieve on most projects, particularly as the lots get smaller. A 25% requirement is very difficult when you associate that with a parking requirement and drive aisles to accommodate parking on that same lot. And plus, if they avail themselves of the additional 15% of available to them for residential development, there's usually open space areas associated with the residential development and walkways, accessible areas to that development or that residential component, storage, and the 25% total for the site becomes very difficult. What we're suggesting is reducing the requirement to 20%, and then on a sliding scale, go down further as the lots get smaller to 15% for lots smaller than 20,000 square feet, and for lots that are under 10,000 square feet, a 10% requirement for open space. These are minimums, and all of these projects are subject to a use permit approval and design review approval. If at any time the ZDRB or council believes a higher number is warranted, that's certainly open to be required, but these would be minimums. The second area that we'd like to address is clarifying the eligible use of open space. Well, let me back up one second. Clarifying these definitions of what usable open space, visually accessible, and physically accessible refer to. We have a definition of the usable open space that we would like to amend it to include areas that are physically and or visually accessible. Physically accessible is the current standard, and that is a little ambiguous. Does that mean you can walk on it, you can have some activity on it, or is it a landscape area you can just look at? There are some developments and commercial developments in town. An example would be, say, Bistro Gentil, that really has no open space, but they do a really good job of providing a quality to the landscaping there that contributes to the streetscape, and it makes the project appealing. So we would like to add that it is meaning visually accessible as well, that it's something you can look at that's pleasing. We would also add that all landscape, hardscape areas are included. And then get moving on to what it means to associate with this visually accessible from the public way. That is in the requirement right now that it talks about most open space should be physically accessible to the public. That's a little ambiguous. Does that mean how they get to it? And we would like to, they do point out that you do not have to, you should not be required to go through a building to get to this space. We would like to add that it's physically accessible to the public from within the site and visually accessible to the public from vantage points from within the site itself. That if the public were to walk into an area that is meant for a public usable open space within the site, and then they can see something that's not necessarily visible from the public way, that would be counted as physically accessible to the public.
Can I ask a clarifying question? So,
Yes.
for example, the courtyard next to the patio at Napa Style, can't see that from the right-of-way, but you can easily walk in and see that. Is that what you mean by that?
Yes, or Sorrento, the more recent project where if you go down between the buildings, there's a courtyard there.
Okay.
Once you get there, you can see that it's visually accessible and physically accessible. So that's a clarification that's in the ordinance 411 draft, that commercial usable open space shall include exterior use areas that are, being viewed from the public way and from vantage points within the site. And then the last issue we'd like to address is to clarify the eligibility of open space and remaining qualified usable open space, so it doesn't dip into the FAR and gets counted against the project. So the eligible uses right now, and there's been an interpretation by staff that we've applied consistently over time of I'll call it the Bouchon example, in Bouchon Bakery, to where it's outdoor seating that is open to the public, available to the public. It's not part of either Bouchon with one asterisk on their evening service of dinner, but it's generally in the daytime, available to the public to sit down. They're not excluded. If they want to read a newspaper, they don't have to buy a product from either establishment. And it's not part of the business plan necessarily, in the daytime at least, of either business that they are serving out there and depending on that area for part of their income revenue stream. The exception would be in the evening when Bouchon in summer months seasonally has dinner service in that area. So that's the example we've used of, and it's always kind of on the line of, I should say it's not in the ordinance and laid out in the ordinance as recognized as that's the case of what usable open space available to the public means. And we would like to, in this ordinance, clarify that with this addition that usable open space, or commercial usable open space, shall include exterior use areas that are generally not dedicated for the exclusive use of customers, except the area may be used exclusively for the business only on an intermittent or irregular basis as approved. And the example would be seasonal or evening use only. The use of the area is not integral or essential to the operation of the business. The area is available to the general public, and the area is not serviced except for limited courtesy service. And the example would be a pre-purchased item is delivered to the customer outside. But the tables aren't serviced, there's no follow-up service, a waiter, waitress does not come out and check on how they're doing. They simply, as a convenience to the customer, deliver a product that's already been paid for. That's the clarification we would like to put into the ordinance that removes any ambiguity about when an outdoor area is eligible to be counted as open space. So those are essentially the two areas, those clarifications to what visually accessible, physically accessible, and the use of an area as open space, and the other reduction in the percentages of commercial open space.
Very good. Are there any questions of staff at this point? Councilmember Dornbecker?
Bob, I have a question. How can you relate this to me in terms of FAR? Because I don't quite see
Okay.
the relationship.
Floor area ratio, in its definition, includes, typically you would think of it as areas within, enclosed within a building, floor area. But it also includes areas that are exterior to the building that are service areas. And the clearest example would be outdoor seating at a restaurant, where there's table service. They don't allow just anyone to walk
I
up,
see.
sit down, read a newspaper. It's for the exclusive use of their customers.
I see.
Those patio areas are counted as though they were enclosed floor area within the building. And they are counted against their limitation on floor area.
On floor space.
Yes.
I see. Okay, thank you.
So I'm just going to ask you take that one step further, because I'm not sure that it was as clear as maybe you would like, but that type of serviced outdoor space, you're saying, is still calculated as if it was inside the business. So how does it relate to this definition change? Would it still be counted as floor area in that calculation, or are you saying that it would not?
It would not. It would be counted as open space.
So
For the reason-
even though there is service that relates to their general operation of the business, because it's a visual open space, meaning not a massing of a building, you would basically exclude the use of the space because it's the benefit of the space not being built out is still received. Is that?
Well, those areas are physically accessible, visually accessible, and they're not a requirement of the business. The business does not depend on them, their customers. Their customer buys their product, usually inside. They leave, whether they go out and sit down and eat it there, or they get in their car and leave, or walk away. They're not counting on that space as part of their business. It's provided as an open space area.
Okay, so continuing your example of Bouchon Restaurant and Bakery, the outdoor seating of Bouchon Restaurant that's fully enclosed to the restaurant, no access outside of the restaurant, you're saying that would still count toward FAR or would not?
That counts towards FAR. The patio in
Would
front
not.
that's outdoor, that is where orders are taken for Bouchon,
Right.
that counts as FAR. And this would not count as FAR for the new concept of its seasonal and intermittent use.
Right, so the courtyard is not counted. The table patio with full table service is calculated.
Yes, it would.
And that's what you're proposing would be that's the way it is now, and that's the way it would continue.
That is that's a new distinction, as well as the recognition of areas that are, although the customer may use it to consume a product that he purchased inside, it's not necessary to the business that they do that. And there's no service other than maybe a convenience to the customer where they're brought something, and that's the end of the service. And that would be it.
For a good illustration, the patio at Hurley's and the patio at Pac Blues would both be counted towards the FAR because they are structured into that service delivery, not incidental and not generally open. A comparison, some of the open space and seating at the Ranch Market and Yountville Deli is incidental, and that would be what we would consider open space, just to try to give you some, I think most everybody can relate to how those spaces play differently.
Well, the concrete examples definitely help. So, Vice Mayor, did you have a question?
Well, I guess my only question that kind of dovetails with this has to do with this concept of intermittent or irregular seasonal evening. I mean, do you have a concern that a restaurant might say, for breakfast and lunch, which we don't even serve, anybody can come in and sit on our patio. We're happy to have that, but we're just going to use it for dinner only. I don't want to use the Bouchon example is probably a pretty good one. And try to reasonably argue that, hey, this is not this should not be counted as FAR because we're using it intermittently. Or, for example, a patio is not used in the winter just because it's raining, et cetera, to say that that is a seasonal use of that area. How do you plan to handle that situation?
Well, Bouchon is an anomaly. We have no other business that operates in that fashion. And that was approved and went through the approval process and was acknowledged in that approval that that's what the circumstance would be. It would be an occasional and, of course, seasonal use of that area. So when it came down to preparing this ordinance and recognizing those open space areas that would otherwise qualify, we had this one anomaly to address. For the percentage of time that it is used for the restaurant, it's in the evening, the bakery is closed. And that was part of the consideration for, I believe, why it was approved, that there was no competing use on site otherwise that there is in the daytime for those seats. So that was language that was put in there to accommodate that circumstance where you have a business that operates but not in competition with another business that operates only in the daytime and does not operate in portions of the year where outdoor seating is not possible.
And I think there's also another point that we need to make in this, which is not necessarily tied here, but as a conditional use permit, when you are considering approval of something on that intermittent basis, we can identify and put in a parking plan and evaluate so that those seats are incorporated into the parking count. But what we're really talking about here is the fact that the intermittent use or a space that doesn't look like, for example, Hurley's patio, where it's, that can be considered open space even though it may be allowed to be used on an intermittent basis for something more related to the business. But we will definitely try to identify the appropriate parking demand so that that's addressed, because but that comes back to our using the seat count to determine the parking ratio for the project.
So I guess you basically touched on it. I guess one of your favorite lines, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it probably is a duck. So in the conditional use permit process, if somebody's going to come in and try to make a stretch argument that, this is, it's open for breakfast, you can come in here, then staff and or the council who's making that approval can say, let's be realistic here. Is that probably how that would play out?
Well, they would need a use permit, and they would need to state their case, and that would be laid out as a factor.
But I also want you to think about, again, we're now mixing, and this is good because the conversation about FAR led to certain things. We can address the parking component. The parking component can easily be identified in the conditional use permit based on what the internal seating of the establishment is and what the potential intermittent seasonal use, and then address the parking standard. The real question for you today really is, from an aesthetic and a design standpoint, do some of these features, for example, from an aesthetic and open space and a community asset, does the landscaping of a public courtyard, an area like Bouchon, like what's at Ranch Market, do those add value? And they are landscaping standards different between the two. But the point I'm trying to make is, do they add value to the community? And right now, our open space standards really make it's challenging, and in some ways, especially when we look at finishing build out for our community, we end up, frankly, with stuff that meets the open space definition but really isn't very exciting or adding value to the urban experience. And that's what we're trying to suggest, that these changes would allow for a little more flexibility and hopefully creativity.
Well, and I'd like to...
You mean what I think is so-so? Or... I think the front of Plaza Corsia is really not programmed very well, and it was designed to meet our open space requirements, and to throw some stuff in, but in terms of functionality and visual, I don't think it's nearly as exciting as some of the things. I mean, I don't want to go back to Bouchon, but Bouchon and that area, it has so many variances from the town standard. There isn't one thing on FAR, open space, and parking, and yet that's considered a community asset. And I don't want to be negative in how I present this, but to me, Plaza Corsia is a good example of a development that was built on meeting minimum standards.
And I think that's what the requirement is, what you were alluding to is after. We require usable open space. They build it, and guess what? They want to use it. And it's, I think the intent was that the requirement behind the usable open space is to add some vitality to the street and have people using it, and there's activity at the street, and that's what happens. And it becomes real, that's what we're trying to resolve here, is how they use it. When does that start being a service area and should get counted towards their FAR as opposed to people just using open space?
Yeah, I think we're getting away from the where we should be discussing right now is questions about this. I think we're getting much more into the general discussion, so I'm going to ask that we have any final questions of Bob, and if we don't, then I'm going to open the public hearing. Okay, so that's what I will do. We'll formally open the public hearing and invite any members of the public that would like to speak to this issue. Seeing none, moving forward, I will close the public hearing. And now we can continue the discussion about council's comfort or discomfort with this draft ordinance. Are there specific, let's talk about whether language in here is inappropriate or you don't support it, so we can address any concerns. I mean, if we all agree that it's a well-drafted document, then the conversation's much shorter. But Vice Mayor, it looks like you were moving forward. Did you have a comment?
I'll be quick. I totally agree with the concept of what this is. I think in all the years I've been on the council, the open space requirements have been, in many ways, a hindrance to good development. Although the intent was honorable, I think that the impact on what we get out of projects is probably a negative. So I support all of the changes in the open space percentages. I think that Section A, which we've been talking about, the open space, commercially usable open space, et cetera, as you stated, is generally a clarification in the ordinance of practice of interpretation of how we've been doing it. And, I'm generally for letting people come forth with good projects and something that they want to do and make an argument for it. And I think this helps in that area. So I support the ordinance as it's written all the way through.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker?
I totally agree, and I'm delighted to see it, and I hope that it does inspire more, more creative open space uses, especially for the vitality of the streets. So I support it.
Councilmember Moeller, comments?
I think overall that, I think it's good that we're thinking about this and trying to figure out a good way to deal with some of the past difficulties that we have in setting these. I think that, the only language that I really don't like is this pre-purchase item delivered to the customer. I mean, it just brings up to me, back to Bouchon as the example, somebody, ordered a couple cupcakes and there's somebody comes out of the store and it's like, number 13, where are you? And, as long as we can somehow deal with that, so it's not like this, fast food restaurant, trying to locate the customer with a sandwich or something. So that is one piece of language that I'm certainly not comfortable with right now. I don't really know any example where we would probably even use that. So that was my biggest concern. My other concern was that with this proposed change, I mean, we've really asked all of our previous developers to adhere to this standard. And now that if we make this change, I would expect that, those who have complied in the past would also appreciate the same consideration retrospectively for their open space. So I am concerned about that. Otherwise, I agree. I think it's good that we're thinking about how to deal with this.
Two things. One is, obviously, you've asked us to be doing this, and this is part of our ongoing efforts to review and modernize. As with any change the council makes, it's obviously applicable to things going forward. Given the nature of some of the built-out site development, if they did come in and make modifications, we would apply the new standard to that, and if they were able to make some improvements and be consistent with that, we'd certainly work with them and support that. But I do think you need also to be thinking about how it's going to potentially move forward with the small number of parcels we have left in the commercial district, and this may hopefully get you a more creative project. But the short answer is if somebody came with an existing built environment, wanted to do something, staff would apply the ordinances in place at this time, including this one.
And Bob, could you give an example why you recommend the language of pre-purchased? Basically, you say courtesy service as opposed to daily operational service?
Yeah, a lot of it hinged on the FAR definition, and it says if there's an area that is serviced, it's FAR. And then it became, well, does handing someone a sandwich and walking away, is that service? And we wanted to, that's such a minimal level. And then there's no further services. They don't take the order at the table, and they don't, it's already paid for. And it's simply a convenience that maybe the sandwich needed to be prepared, and now it's done, and they're just walking it out to them. And we didn't see that. We wanted to clarify that it's not really service in the sense that you go to a restaurant, you sit down, the waiter comes and takes your order, and you're in this dining relationship all of a sudden with the waiter as opposed to being handed something you've already paid for.
So how does this relate to tasting rooms and what we have designated as open space, non-serviceable area? Does this then mean a person that is paying for a tasting can now have regular service where they come out, service them in what was considered open space, as opposed to requiring the guest to go in, which is the way we've been doing it?
I would say no.
That they could have that?
The tasting room, the nature of the business is you're tasting, and the service is now, if it's outside, that changes that. That's part of their business now. That's part of their business model. They're now doing the tasting outside instead of at the tasting bar.
So that is still excluded. That would be FAR, either direct open space, and that would be prohibited, or it would be calculated in.
That's right. It would not be open space then. It would be part of it.
Okay, so there is a distinction.
Yes. And the other thing is that, on your point about, I don't think there's going to be this newfound, because we're changing the percentages of open space. There's a lot of other things at play. One of them is FAR, and most businesses build out to their maximum FAR. And if some open space is now found, it doesn't mean that gets now added on to FAR with new building. That also generates parking, which they probably don't have either. And I would also point out that numerous approvals of commercial projects in the past have been granted exceptions to open space, so they're already lower than the numbers of 25% to begin with.
Great. Councilmember Hall, your comments?
Yeah. I guess in principle, I think it's fine the way it's written. I think anything we can do as a community to encourage and make it easier or less restrictive for people to apply and get approval for projects, specifically where we're as a community going to benefit. And if it does provide a better way to be creative with open space, I would encourage that. The question I that kept going back in my mind is, we have tasting rooms, and people are not averse to taking their taste outside with them and sitting in a public forum or in what we consider open space today, and how that would ultimately apply. And I recognize, based on your comments, that isn't if it were to be utilized in that manner, then it would be applicable to the FAR, and hopefully that would be prohibited. Now, I don't know how that is enforced, but that would be something that I would project might become a challenge. But we're not talking about an enormous change at this
I
point
think
in
we
time.
could add a sentence to clarify this, because this is, we every once in a while, we'll use our walking, quacking duck. So if we want to be very clear that if you choose to use the space for wine service, then it will be counted as FAR. So I think that's a simple addition that we could add to clarify in that area, because what we're basically saying is the very limited de minimis use. And I'll give a good example, because it happened to me, and I'll not name the coffee establishment. And I had gone out and had neglected to leave. I had my coffee, but was engaged in a conversation with somebody and had gone outside. And then they said, "You left your pastries," and the person brought out and handed me my pastry. Now, technically, I think that kind of fits what Bob is trying to identify as a courtesy de minimis service, or I could see where somebody, there's a long line, they go out and sit in what we're calling the non-kind of dedicated, and if somebody hands somebody the bag that they may have left at the counter, or assume that it's even perhaps an ADA disability situation where the shopkeeper is trying, to do that, but it's not part of, and I think we understand Councilmember Moeller and can say, if you start having numbers, that's not a courtesy. And I think that's the key. Bob has here limited. So, if the standard protocol is, go out and sit in the common open space area and we'll get you, I'll use a good example. We would not consider addendum, because of the system that they're using, that would count against them in how they're choosing to use that. Even though it fits on their space, that triggers all that. So that's just a kind of a good balance. But again, I think part of what we want is some flexibility. We still have incredible control in this community under your land use decisions because of so many things coming in as a conditional use permit. And what we really are trying to work hard at the staff level is really having the applicant identify in their own narrative, in their own language, what they intend to do. And then we have a better understanding. The challenge we face is sometimes after a bit of time, they want to modify what they thought they wanted to do, and we still want to offer some flexibility, and we want to offer some guidelines. But again, I think the real intent here is Bob and Sandra have really taken some evaluation of a number of projects and said, what do we really have that's worked well, or what has the council historically done? And his point is, we've historically granted a lot of open space variances with basically something that you said, hey, we really like what we're getting. We see it, the applicants have created, and we think this is more realistic and also appropriate. The number of parcels we have left, they're all small in scale. And we want to get attractive, high-quality projects.
Okay, thank you. I hesitate to have language that calls out wine service. Specifically for the point you just made, there is a food service situation that would apply just as easily. So I think if we want to add or clarify the language to make it clearer about what Bob means by the courtesy or casual service. I thought, Bob, you touched on some language about it not being an extension of the core use or core business.
Yeah, that's in the definition. The use of the area is not integral or essential to the operation of the business. And if you're running a wine tasting room and you're doing wine tasting outside, then that would probably put it in that category.
Well, then I would suggest maybe we just take out the EG because you've already addressed the issue of non-integral and essential to the operation. It's available to the general public, and the area is not serviced except for limited courtesy service. I don't know that the language is necessary, and that may be, maybe Councilmember Moeller can
That
address
would
it.
be very helpful to me. I like that suggestion.
The rest of the council okay with that amendment to the language? Does that kind of achieve what we're talking about? Councilmember Hall, you don't look convinced.
I'm reading it, sorry.
Okay, Vice Mayor?
Well, I know you just said to strike the EGA pre-purchase items delivered to the customer. When I read this, you gave the addendum example. That's not an example that I would have thought of that would fall under that situation, because you do go to a spot, you make a purchase, you go and sit down at a table. I don't even think well, I guess they do. They write your name or something like that, and they come and just drop it off, and there's no further service whatsoever. So the idea that if they hadn't had that pre-approved, that would be considered not usable open space. I guess that definition of what is limited courtesy service is, I'm not sure that my interpretation of it was the same of what your interpretation
Well,
of it. Are we giving enough guidance?
Well, I think in this particular case, if you look at addendum, that whole area is an extension of the kitchen. You go there to buy that, so then that actually becomes the business. But I think this is also, we will continue to have some evolution, and the question will be, does this allow us a little more flexibility, and hopefully we do a better job in writing the conditions based on when somebody sees that.
If I could interrupt, I think that the confusion, Steve, is the way you're wording this. You're saying, and maybe you're not saying it, the building that's in the back in the garden that they're using as a to-go order location would be counted into their FAR.
And their parking.
The picnic tables in the landscape area would not, because
That's
there is
correct.
not
That's what you
table
meant.
service.
I thought you meant that whole area would be.
No, I'm sorry,
That's
that's
in-
correct.
That's where I think the confusion was. It wasn't
Thank
clear.
you.
So,
Okay.
Again, and that's correct, because the order shack and where you go is directly related to the business. The fact that you choose to go sit at their picnic area is up to you, because under that model, you're able to take your bag of chicken and go.
yes.
So I guess taking out an example to me might leave somebody even more confused when they read this. If I was going to open up a wine tasting room and hadn't come to staff, I would think area's not served except for limited courtesy service. Well, that sounds like, hey, I'm just going to come out here and pour one of your 4 glasses. And
That's limited, correct.
That's limited.
Very limited.
The line
Go back a
directly
couple of
above it is
sentences.
the non-essential part of the operation. If you are a tasting room, if you are a food establishment, and you are providing wine or food, that's a core service.
How is that any different than delivering a pastry when you happen to forget it at the counter? Oh, here's your pastry you forgot. Oh, here's your next pour. Sorry you didn't come in and get your next pour in time. I see they're not very. We know that the enforcement will be the issue, and I'm fine the way that this is written. I don't know about the example because I think less ambiguity is better. Less is more, or more is less in this case. But what I would say is that I'm fine with the way it's written. I want to make sure that we all understand that there will become an enforcement issue. We can guarantee it. People will arbitrage the way the ordinance is written, just as they are today. It's not. We're not changing anything other than we're just having a discussion about it. So I'm indifferent to whether or not we strike EG from it. I can go either way.
Well, there seems to be support for striking that
and I'm
example
okay with
because
that.
it maybe too narrowly focuses one's attention to that.
And I'm fine with that.
And gets you away from the line that's right above it, which is, I think, the more critical language anyway. Because I think it's important that we keep in mind what the intent of these percentages are, and the whole point of open space is so we're not dealing with buildings that go from lot line to lot line and have no visual appeal to the general public. I mean, those are some of the core reasons for this, and I don't think we're losing that by adjusting these percentages to be more manageable and more realistic.
Can I ask one?
Yes.
Just a point of clarification, I think, to your statement that we're not actually changing anything specifically. A wine tasting room, for example, right now, I believe in their use permit. I mean, forget about how it calculated their open space before. Their use permit is the guiding document for whether they can have service outside. So even if they were going to say, well, we think it's limited courtesy service, you've got an existing use permit that forbids you from doing that. Isn't that, I mean, I think that's ultimately where we would go back to, and that they want to make the argument that it's not integral to their business or essential and is available to the general public, then they can come try to make that argument. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So strike EG, I'm fine with that.
Is there a motion to introduce this first reading with that amended language, striking the EG language at the end of Section A?
Yes, I will move that are we entering it for adoption?
Introduce and first reading of the ordinance.
Introduce ordinance number 4011-11, an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Yountville amending the Yountville Municipal Code, Title 17 zoning, Chapter 17.96 open space and trees, and Title 18 design standards, Chapter 18.40 commercial buildings, with one change, and that is deleting the example at the end of Example A under, now therefore the Town of Council of Yountville does ordain as follows.
Is that motion clear to staff?
Yes.
We need to waive the reading.
And to waive the reading.
Unless you want to read it.
No, thank you.
I'll second.
Councilmember Hall seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you for the discussion and analysis. And we have been working on this for years, trying to just groom it so that it's a little bit more toward the intent. So thank you all for doing that. Let's move on to item 10, administrative and regular items. I know we have one member of the public who's been sitting patiently waiting for this item.
And with that, I'd briefly like to introduce Ken Wells, who's going to talk tonight a little bit about what is known as extended producer responsibility. First, this presentation is a end product of our relationship with Upper Valley Waste Management Authority, of which we are a member. Councilmember Moeller is the town's representative, and part of the discussion today is looking at a consideration of a resolution in support of what is known as the extended producer responsibility, with the end goal being to reduce the amount of waste that is then generated and all of the consequences that go with that. So with that, I'm going to let Councilmember Moeller make any comments as the town's rep, and when she's made some introductory comments, because this is a presentation that has come out of Upper Valley Waste, and then we'll turn it over to Mr. Wells for a more detailed explanation on what the process is and what we're asking for.
Thank you. Councilmember Moeller, do you have any introductory comments?
Our introductory comments, nice to see you, Mr. Wells. I'm assuming you're going to be giving a very similar presentation that you gave to our agency board. And we're constantly really dealing with household hazardous waste and how to get rid of it. We put a lot of stuff in our recycling, but that can't go in there. It can't go in our garbage. And so it's really not a garbage, trash, I don't know the proper word for waste, but it's really not. It comes down to being a local government issue. And so I think that this is perhaps a very creative way to send a message. It's really all he's going to be talking about, that we are going to be sending a message to start trying to deal with some of this garbage or waste that we can no longer deal with through our normal waste stream. So the Upper Waste Management Agency unanimously approved that we add our names to all the other agencies that would like to encourage this. So I asked Mr. Wells if he would also come to the council to see what our opinion was.
Thank you. Mr. Wells, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Dunbar and council members and Councilmember Moeller. Thank you. Ken Wells. I'm a consultant with the California Product Stewardship Council, and the council is an organization. Oops, wrong one. Which one do I hit? That one. Except that they go really fast. There we go. Okay. The California Product Stewardship Council is a nonprofit organization composed of local governments. And actually, my history is that I was actually the solid waste manager in Sonoma County for 16 years, and I'm one of the founders of the Product Stewardship Council because we discovered in trying to deal with household hazardous waste, the toxic items that are in our lives, that there is no easy, inexpensive, simple way to get rid of them when they end their life. They are very expensive to get rid of at their end of life, to the point that the Household Hazardous Waste Program is one of the most expensive things that these organizations like the Upper Valley has to deal with. So how else can we deal with these problem products in a way that is efficient, that's good for the environment, that's good for the bottom line? And that's where product stewardship comes into play. And just in a quick, this is going to take less than 10 minutes. I'm just going to go through a few slides to kind of frame it for you. And what I'm going to be asking is, as the Upper Valley Waste Management Agency did, is to approve a resolution of support. And and the reason here is that what the Product Stewardship Council is doing is working in Sacramento with our legislation, with our legislators and the governor, to try to get regulations and requirements in place that producers have a role in the end of life for these products. And numbers count. So the more communities that we can say support this idea, the more effective we can be in Sacramento. And so that's kind of my ask at the front, and I'll get to the ask at the end as well. But there's so what is EPR? It's the extension of the responsibility for the end of life to the producer in the retailer and the seller of these products, not just you at the end of the phone dies, the light bulb ends. What do you do with it? Well, let's bring the producer into the conversation, into the process, because they built it. They know how it works. And maybe if they're responsible for it at the end of life, they'll design it a little differently. So another way of describing this is product stewardship. I actually call it take-back laws. That's kind of the common phrase. The idea that the producer is responsible for taking it back at the end of their life. This does, as I mentioned before, it encourages green design. If they know they're going to be responsible for it, they're going to design it such that they can either take it apart, they'll eliminate the toxic components, maybe they'll make it so that it's what was I going to try to say? It's just simply, it can be reused with simply a replacing of a small part. A computer these days, sometimes it's just the operating system or the operating chip that needs to be replaced. Those sorts of things. If they're responsible for it, they'll start thinking about that. Let me see, there you go. This is just a quick shot of all of the different communities that have approved these resolutions, including the Regional Council of Rural Counties. I know that I heard earlier you guys are members of that. These are the organizations that support producer responsibility. And then, let's see if I can get this. I'll just do these all at one time here. 100 years ago, waste was mostly what we called mineral, and I'll just tell you, it was ash. We used coal, we used wood for heating. That was the majority of the weight of our trash 100 years ago. But over time, products came into play, and to the point now where the vast majority of what we discard, what we throw away, the trash, the refuse, the garbage, I go on for a lot of those synonyms, but they're products. And when I say products, in this particular case, we're also talking the packaging for those products. The rest of it is primarily organics. That's food waste and green waste and things like that, things that can compost. But today, they're disposable products. By design, they're not intended to be reconditioned, rebuilt, repaired. They're designed to be disposed. And that's the problem that we're trying to deal with here. In California, we've been doing pretty good at banning things. The legislature has no hesitation in banning things. All fluorescent lamps, batteries, all electronic products, toxics, paint, they're all banned from the landfill. But they didn't reduce the toxicity. They did not create any collection or recycling options. They didn't, and what they did was said to local governments like Yountville, like the Upper Valley, like Sonoma County, you guys are responsible for it. Take care of it. No funding, no other ways of handling that. And it puts the cost burden on the ratepayers and the taxpayers. And so that was really the genesis of the Product Stewardship Council. we banned after the universal waste ban in 2006, I believe. This was just after that. It didn't stop the illegal disposal of these products. These are all fluorescent lamps that were in a landfill. These have small amounts of mercury in them. This is not the way they're supposed to be handled. Today we have what we would describe as a linear waste management system. You manufacture, you sell it to the consumer, and then the consumer is responsible to figure out how to either recycle it, throw it away, pay the money to the local government or to the recycler, and then it gets into the landfill process, or it gets processed as recycling or goes into landfill. What we'd like to see in the future is what we would call cradle to cradle, which is actually a circular system, like the recycling symbol, where you have take-back programs, whether it's a mail-back, collection sites, even the existing haulers can use it, but let's have them supported by the producers. The EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility, is very flexible. It can be something as simple as a return at depot, or something like the OSH, where you can drop off your fluorescent lamps or your batteries. This is not unique. We're not breaking new ground here. In Canada, in British Columbia specifically, they have an extensive EPR program, and it's very efficient, both cost-wise and convenience-wise. And so we're not unfortunately leading the planet on producer responsibility, but there are lots of good examples, and there are lots of good programs out there so that we know how to do it efficiently. These are the Retailers Association, including these companies, have supported EPR. So this is not as adversarial as it might appear at first. Certainly some of the manufacturers are hesitant to support it, but the Retailers Association recognizes that this is, when you integrate everybody into the conversation, you're going to get a better outcome. We actually have EPR legislation that has been approved in California. Pesticide containers, mercury thermostats, paint, and carpet, and brake pads were all last year's legislation. So we're going to see, in fact, I want to talk a little bit more about paint. Was actually approved as an EPR law last year in the legislature and signed by the governor. Paint is the #1 waste stream product, both by volume and by cost, for household hazardous waste programs. As I ask everybody, if you've ever done a paint job in your house, have you ever bought exactly the right amount of paint? If you do it right, you end up with a little bit left over. And because you don't want to run out just before you finish. And what do you do with the leftover? It's a toxic that has to be dealt with, and the household hazardous waste programs can be very expensive to do that. But what if you could take it back to the place where you bought it, and then they know that they're going to get it back quickly. I'm going to go ahead and point out that we spend $27 million in local government monies just to handle this material with the leftovers. There's 2 million gallons of leftover paint that are in California every year. And we spend $90 million a year buying excess paint. So, as I said, whether we want to or not, we end up doing that. It's a serious problem. This is a paint take-back program in Oroville. This is 2009. You can see what happens. So we now have paint stewardship in California. AB 1343 was signed. It starts a year from now. There's a new organization created by the paint industry called Paint Care. And what they're going to be doing is things like the existing household hazardous waste program that you have, they'll help come collect it. They'll pay you to collect it for them. So the burden is off of local government and onto the manufacturer. They're going to have a small charge. I think it's 30 cents a gallon. I mean, when you think about it, it's not that much. But they'll be collecting funds from the sale of the paint to fund the program. Let me see what else. So that's really the completion of my my kind of points, laying the groundwork for what is EPR, what is product stewardship. The CPSC is a nonprofit. I need to make sure that I point out that this presentation is brought to you by CalRecycle. I'm being funded by the CalRecycle is the state organization that regulates solid waste and hazardous waste in California. They have a grant that they're getting out where we're actually educating local governments, business groups, the community at large, what is EPR, so that when these ideas come forward, that people will understand it and recognize it as a very valuable policy tool. I'll say just in passing or in concluding, my background is as an engineer and economist. EPR makes sense from that perspective. It's efficient. It's effective. You don't have a lot of, in fact, I'll even say it this way. I want to get local government out of it. because we're not the most efficient, we're not the most effective way to do things, and the manufacturers are. So I'm going to wrap up. Thank you for the opportunity to make the presentation. I hope that I made a convincing argument for producer responsibility, and what I would ask is that you might consider approving a resolution of support that we can put on our website. We'll take it to our the legislators in Sacramento and say, hey, local governments support this idea, and I'll just conclude by saying we have a couple of topics on the agenda right this year. Batteries. Not all batteries are take-back required, so we would like to see all household batteries, the little alkalins that you have at the end of life. It would be nice if there was a take-back law for those. Fluorescent lamps. They are toxic. We're going to eventually have LEDs, but it's not going to happen tomorrow. It's going to take some time. So it would be great if the retailers and the producers of fluorescent lamps were responsible to take them back so that we could get those recycled correctly. And sharps, which is the needles and things like that, are also a problem area. And those are all three areas that we're looking at this year at the legislature that hopefully we can work with. So with that, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer those, and that is my presentation, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Councilmember Dornbecker.
Yes. I was wondering, I have often thought about not only sharp needles, but so many Americans take so many pills, and is there a program whereby the pharmaceutical companies, can they be required to take those containers back and reuse them? It just drives me bananas that all those little plastic pill bottles get put into the.
Oh, you're talking about the containers themselves, not the contents.
Contents so much,
Yeah,
although
yeah.
There are occasionally programs where you can bring back unused prescriptions and things, and there'll be. I think there was one in St. Helena at the fire station, and I took some things back there. And I have asthma, so I have some inhalers, and I don't, I usually save them up until I hear about something like that, and then I take them.
Right. Absolutely. Pharmaceuticals, both, and primarily the contents, are actually another problem material. We don't want to see those in the wastewater system because some people think that maybe putting it down the toilet is the best thing to do. Absolutely not. And it isn't convenient to get rid of those things. And so in British Columbia, they have a pharmaceutical medicines take-back program. It's extremely inexpensive. I think it's $300,000 for the entire province to do everything. But we've gotten some pushback from the pharmaceutical industry and who don't want any more responsibilities, but they really are the most efficient way to do it. And absolutely, if they're taking back the contents, they can take the containers. And if they know they're going to get the containers, maybe we can get standardization of the kinds of plastics so that they can be recycled easily. Not necessarily reused necessarily, but certainly recycled. So I think that's a very good question and a very important one that we want to be dealing with from both, not just from the efficiency sense, but we want to get these things out of the wastewater and out of the environment.
Well, I saw the list, partial list of the retailers that you said were supportive, but who are the manufacturers who support this?
Oh, I actually I shortened my presentation here, but I did have a slide with manufacturers. Organizations like IKEA, Dell, Sony, Caterpillar Tractor. So a range of different, both electronics and manufacturing industries support this. One of my little stories is Caterpillar Tractor makes heavy equipment. They use very, very high-quality steel in producing their components. If they can get back a worn part and use that as the basis, they don't have to buy the high-quality steel. They can use that again. So they see some very, very strong economic advantages to getting their own products back. And there's also that customer loyalty that it engenders, because now they've got somebody that they're going to see over and over again. So,
but aren't you getting a lot of pushback from manufacturers?
There are some. Certainly, when we get down to the actual trying to get legislation, there's been some splits. The fluorescent lamp industry is one where you're seeing some support, some not. So that makes it a little more troubling. No, you're right. It's something that they've been able to externalize in an economics perspective. This is a cost to them that they've externalized onto the environment, onto local governments. So they're not necessarily they're not encouraging the new legislation, but where we see it happening, it's been very efficient and it's been very effective.
Thank you.
But I'll just.
Pardon? Oh, the compact fluorescents. Yeah, that's one with, when I say fluorescent lamps, I'm generically talking about the tubes and the compacts. Yeah, it would be, and that is legislation that we're trying to get through in the legislature this year. And it's already in many other places around the world.
I was going to mention as an example, following up Councilmember Dornbecker, printer cartridges in the printer that I use at home comes with a return postage stamped envelope. So, you know, those go right back, and that
right.
manufacturer is taking that responsibility.
It's convenient, it's easy. Those are the key things. It doesn't cost you anything. That's an excellent example. Now, that's a voluntary program, but they have a small circuit board in that cartridge that they can reuse, and so they see some economics to that. What I didn't talk about in much detail was that we need a level playing field. Where one manufacturer may be willing to do this, but others aren't, then it creates an economic not just a disincentive, but actually an uneven playing field competitively. The people who are doing the right thing are actually at a competitive disadvantage to those that are doing it by externalizing their costs on the local government, on the ratepayer. So,
are there any other
excellent example
comments associated with this? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Well, you've repeatedly talked about the responsibility on the local government. I mean, we have trash pickup here, but the ratepayers pay it. The government does not pay it. And I guess my concern has to do with, you know, when I see some of these things, I don't want to get us out of the business of collecting things, because as a consumer, I think it's going to be unlikely that people are going to, you know, take all their cans back to Home Depot and take their batteries back over here and have to figure. I mean, everybody driving around, supposedly, forget it, they're going to throw it in the trash. So what I hope we have is, because we have a hazardous waste collection facility here in town, which I think gets a lot more people using it rather than just throwing a can of paint in the trash can. So I hope that I assume that the folks in Canada, for example, have systems that have worked well to get people to use them. That's not just at the mailing everything. We can't mail fluorescent light tubes. So I think that convenience factor, the realism, I'm sure is built in here, but I certainly hope it is.
And perhaps if I continue the conversation for a bit longer, good examples would be you have had collection events up here for toxics, but you've limited them and you haven't had any because you can't afford them. If we have producer responsibility, they'll help pay for those, so they can be more convenient, more frequent. And so that would be one example. And actually, I would say that actually you can mail them back. There's commercial programs now for the fluorescent tubes, a box prepaid, pre-labeled. You put a dozen. This is commercial, essentially. You put a dozen fluorescent tubes in it, 4-foot tubes. Drop it off, and the UPS comes to pick it up at your door.
You're starting to make me think that the lobbyists for the mailing companies are the ones behind this.
Not necessarily, but they'll certainly. We should be efficient. And I guess the other thing I would say, just generally speaking, if I have a battery that dies and I need a new one, or if I have a lamp that dies, or a phone, as if that never happens, I'm going to go get a new one. Well, if I have the capability of going to the store and purchasing and bringing it home, then I think I have the capability of taking the old one with me when I go there. But it's absolutely, it has to become routine, it has to become habit, and we're not there yet. That's going to be the big step, is to say, oh yeah, I've got to go take my grocery sack when I go to the groceries, I'm going to take my sack with me. And it gets it to be habit. But the solutions are going to be a myriad of solutions depending on the product and depending on the situation. It won't just simply be mail back. It won't simply just be a drop-off. It'll depend on the actual product. Pharmaceuticals should go back to the pharmacy probably, because they know how to do it. They know what they're dealing with. So it'll be a very variety of different solutions, but there are good examples out there. Thank you. Good question.
Are there any other comments, or is there a potential action? Councilmember Hall.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt resolution number 2979-11, approving the request from California Product Stewardship Council and Upper Valley Waste Management Authority for the town of Yountville to support the Extended Producer Responsibility EPR program.
I'll second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Councilmember Moeller, for helping foster that as our representative with Upper Valley Waste Management. Let's move on now to what everyone has been waiting for, The capital, at least Graham, the capital improvement program discussion, item 10B.
Okay, thank
Take
you.
it away.
Before I actually start the presentation, I wanted to refer everybody to the capital improvement program binder. Everybody should have one of those. There's one here at the counter. It's also on the web page. And I wanted to recognize and thank Jacob Solis, our Public Works intern, and Sean Grinnell from Pound Management. They spent a lot of time this year collecting information, inventory of equipment and vehicles and benches and you name it. So we're starting to capture all that information, put that in here. Then we're going to look at, okay, how soon do we replace those? How much is it going to cost? They've also put some more information in the descriptions and the cost estimates. There's pictures. So I believe it's a much more readable and understandable document for the public. So I'd like to go through it tonight and talk about our 5-year capital improvement program. Too far. All right. So I want to give you some background on the capital improvement program, talk about changes since last year. We've been doing this for 16 years now, but we're still making changes. Go over the list of projects and then have a review and discussion. So the purpose of the capital improvement program is a financial planning guide. So we're looking at 5 years, what money do we have, where do we want to spend it? It's a long-range management tool. It's not just money, it's also resources for staff consultants. Also, we're looking at leveraging available resources, which to me mostly means grants. And bottom line really is to protect, preserve, enhance, extend the life of, and improve the town's infrastructure. And infrastructure is everything from buildings to streets to pipes to vehicles. We have these functional categories still: civic facilities, community projects, drainage and flood control, parks and recreation, streets and transportation, water distribution, wastewater and water reclamation. There's fund usually set up for each of these. There's also impact fees which are associated with these, so it's pretty consistent with our budget. So for the 5-year capital improvement program, the changes for this year is there's more information about the vehicles, equipment, and we looked at the whole vehicle inventory. We looked at the community center. What do we have out there? We looked at the wastewater treatment plant, the pump station. So we're trying to capture out what do we have, how old is it, how much does it cost to replace it, and when do we need to do that? There's also now the funding for the water and wastewater projects and programs. That's in February you adopted new rates and also a replacement fee for the first time to start to address those long-term needs. We revised the numbering system for the programs. We had looked at changing the number every year, but what we may do is we may have a project for 2011, and we may keep that for several years. But if we want to, let's say, vehicles, we may go 3012, and then the next year 3013. So it's just a little bit of it was a new system last year, and we're just making some improvements to it. The Street Reserve Fund and the Utility Undergrounding Funds have been eliminated, and that funding has been put into the Capital Project Fund, and Kathleen Bradbury, our Finance Director, talked about that with the adoption of the new budget. So in summary, we'll start at the big picture, I guess, is we have 34 projects and programs. There's 12 funding sources, $2.4 million budget, which is actually what we spent last year on the Capital Improvement Program. And it was the 1-year budget was adopted on June 21st. There's $1.5 million from the Capital Projects Fund, which is mostly general funds, which is our TOT, hotel tax, sales tax, property tax. The $420,000 of grant funding is anticipated, $135,000 for developer contributions, $115,000 from the gas tax fund, $76,800 from the Water Capital Fund. This is one of the enterprise funds with the new water rates. $75,000 for the Joint Treatment Plant Capital Fund, which is shared with the Veterans Home, 50-50, as opposed to the Wastewater Capital Fund, which is just a collection system, the recycled water system, at $70,000. So there's our 2.4. So we'll start into the categories. In your binder, there's a tab for each of these categories, and in the front is a summary. So it'll have the programs at the top, which are the 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 numbers, and then the projects are the 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth. So we have equipment replacement fund for the community center and hall. We have the lots of solar panels and heaters, air conditioners, geothermal systems. We also have some renovation projects. We have the acoustical panels, for example, in the new offices for Public Works and Planning. And then also the audiovisual equipment here in the town council chamber, which is showing this live, is actually being funded by the PEG fund, which is set aside with the new cable franchise. So that's where that money is going. $82,000, and this is in Fund 50, which is a capital projects fund, which again is mostly general funds. This is a picture of the pumps at the between the community center and community hall. This is just one of the pieces of equipment that eventually is going to need to be replaced. And if you look at the project description for this, you'll see a list of equipment and how many years it'll take to until we should be replacing those. So again, there's a lot more detail in the capital improvement program budget. This is the ceiling in the offices for planning and public works. It's a little noisy in there, as I think most of you have heard us talk about, and so we'd like to put some acoustical panels in there on the ceiling. In terms of civic facilities for the future, this is a 5-year capital improvement program. We're focused on the first year. What you'll see in this table in the summary is what year of the 5 years do we want to put in the funding, and there's even the last column is the unfunded, which is, for example, the town hall seismic retrofit. We don't have the the money yet, and we're not sure when we're going to get it, and when we do, then we can put that into the into a year of the project, which will probably again need design 1 year, construction the next year, and then the renovation of the park restrooms. I believe that would be in the next fiscal year. The next category is community projects. We have the accessibility improvements for 2011. This would be CP 2011, and then the next one is CP 212. We want to separate these out. So this would be the park paths at Veterans Memorial Park. This goes from New Champagne Drive, which was realigned, and the crosswalk there to the path around the bocce courts. Accessibility improvements for 2012 is the new podium that's going to be here in the council chamber, which Michelle said she's ordered. And also the library door at the having a push button there, so that's easy to open. Curb gutter sidewalk is that whistle stop on the. I'll show you a picture of that one next. Vehicle major equipment replacement, and then utility undergrounding at North Washington. This is almost done. PG was out there today. They took down the wires, cut the poles. We're just waiting for AT&T now, and that will be completed. And that's where most of that developer contribution came from, with so many property owners. $341,000 total budget in Fund 50, which is a capital project fund. So this is at the south end of Veterans Memorial Park, looking south. It's on the west side of Washington Street. Champagne is there on the left, and there'll be a path running across these utility vaults through the redwood trees and the picnic area over to the path around the bocce courts. So it'll be ADA accessible. It'll be colored concrete. This is the door to the library off the plaza, and there'll just be one of those blue push buttons that people can push, and that'll open up the doors to make it easier for people to get in there if they have a stroller or a wheelchair. This is at Whistle Stop on the west side of Washington, just north of Mulberry. The trees are not there anymore, but they did push up the sidewalks, and you can see the crew's been out grinding it. It's lifted. There's puddles, and so we'll get this replaced. This is a 1988 John Deere tractor that we want to replace with a skid steer, which will have attachments like a sweeper for the bike path and the path along Hopper Creek. And it comes with lots of attachments. It's amazing what they can do these days.
Graham, question about that.
Sure.
Based on our previous item, can we just mail that back?
Yeah.
That tractor?
Well, they may want some of the, maybe for a museum. So then this is when the crew was out putting the paving of the joint trench, which was, I want to say November, and PG&E finally got around to removing the poles, and AT&T, those are their poles right there. So hopefully in the next few weeks or month, we'll get that finished up, or they will. Community projects for the future. We have a project for the Emergency Operations Center at the community hall. We want to do some improvements there. Nothing structural, but mostly improvements inside. So it can be an alternate to the fire station, which has had floodwaters around it. Veterans Memorial Park parking improvements. If we're getting close to having a sale of the property where the new park and ride lot is on Solano, California, we could spend that money over on a parking improvements south of Veterans Memorial Park across from the Catholic Church. Townwide photovoltaic systems. We're looking at our biggest energy costs are the wastewater pump stations. There's some space down there. We can maybe put some solar panels there. The other one is up at the treatment plant. We have some areas that could be a potential location for that. Again, offsetting lots of pumping costs and energy. And we may tie that in with the recycled water project. So it may be listed here, but it may get combined with another project in the future. Geographical information system, asset management system. Now that we have this inventory, we like to put it into the computer, and we like to, some things like bridges or buildings put in the geographical information system. Then you can attach a whole database of information and pictures and things like that, so you sort of have it in one place. The next category is drainage and flood control. There's a townwide drainage program. This one, we don't have a specific project identified yet, so this will be a building up the funding. Stormwater management program, we did a project last year, but this one again is just funding. Hopper Creek sediment removal is an annual project, $10,000 for this year. And Bear Ditch bank repair, one more time, maybe I'll go back. Hopper Creek sediment removal is paid for by the Watershed Assessment District, which people pay on their property tax bill, and we get some of the funding. Bear Ditch bank repair is part of Measure A funding for flood management. The project's in design. We've received the permits. We want to get it built before October 15th. So working on that. If not, we'll do it next spring or summer. And then the other Measure A funded project is the hydraulic study of the creeks, Hopper and Henman, and looking at upstream, in town, or downstream, and what's the most cost-effective way to reduce flooding within town. So the total budget comes to $306,000. It's in Fund 50, but we also showed the grant funding going into the revenue in Fund 50. This is what Hopper Creek usually looks like after the winter, before the California Conservation Crew goes out and removes the sediment. Poor guys crawl onto the bridge with buckets and pull all the stuff out of there. And this is what it looks like after, so we're ready for the next winter rains. This is the southeast corner of town, at the southeast corner of the flood wall, and when that pond fills up with water, the pumps kick on and they push this water out into Bear Ditch. So this is looking north up valley, and that water pushes across the ditch onto the east side by the vineyard, and then when you have the flooding from the Napa River, then it causes these erosive forces. So the rocks just weren't big enough, and the design is to put in larger rocks there to stabilize the bank and keep it from eroding further. For future projects, we want to do a stream restoration program, get rid of some of the invasive species, things like that. Fennell Road culvert from Hopper Creek to Bear Ditch. This would be part of the Phase 2 study where we look, okay, is this the most cost-effective way to reduce flooding down at Mulberry and Oak Circle? Washington Street drainage, this one has been out there. We didn't move forward with it at this time because of the permit requirements, but it'd be on the east side of Washington from Padrone down to Hopper Creek. There's really no drainage system there, but because of the outfall of the creek, we need the permits. And then we're also looking at lowering the pedestrian path along Heather between the pedestrian bridge and Oak Circle, and that could provide some more capacity for floodwaters there. But all needs to be studied. Next category is Parks and Recreation. We have the Park Improvement Program. We're doing some improvements in the bocce courts, like lights, but there's some other things listed in the project description and cost estimate. Major playground equipment replacement. We have the playground equipment at Yountville Community Park, at the Tot Lot, at Forester, and so eventually that equipment either they change the codes or it gets old and we need to replace it. So this is mostly putting funding aside for future replacement. Park Paths Program, we're looking at 2 locations, Veterans Memorial Park and Vineyard Park. I have a picture of that also. And then the Swimming Pool Improvement Program, we've always got stuff out there. And then the tennis court resurfacing, which will be a nice new surface there that should keep the cracks from propagating up through the sort of a rubberized surface. So it's $144,000, $250. It's general fund. Capital Improvement Fund, Fund 50.
Graham, before you move on, I
Sure.
just wanted to use the Park Paths program as an example of how kind of fluid and alive this program is, because I know that we had this program set up for maybe this fall to be making some improvements and fixes, but the town has already responded to some conditions that have evolved that really couldn't wait until the fall. So we need to have a little bit of flexibility to respond to conditions as they warrant. But having these plans in place, I think, makes it even more efficient when we do move up the timeline on either part of a project or an entire project. Just replacing either, I know in particular some of the bricks that were on the walkway down around the volleyball courts, not waiting until what it says on the document if we see the condition warrants it, we respond right away and at least minimize or alleviate the dangerous condition. So I think it's important that people realize that not only are these plans that some of which are funded and some are not, but that we aren't just we're not ignoring these things until they're listed on here. We're still keeping our eyes open for whatever needs our attention and when.
It is very true, and we have the operating budget. We can take care of some small things. Ideally, our capital improvement program would foresee everything, and we'd have everything in here, and we'd have a schedule, and we'd just knock it out. But yeah, some things do come up, and we'll adjust as we can. Obviously, it helps to have the funding there, and we can move things around. And we feel that if there's something in a category like this, then as long as it's fairly consistent, if we're really going far afield, we'll come back to the council and ask for a change or a budget adjustment.
And that also goes to, you had a photo of the trees that were removed on Washington Street.
Right.
And there is a plan in place. The tree removal happened as part of our tree maintenance process, but the replacement of the sidewalk and then the replacement of the trees is further down the list, so that's why there's this gap of not replacing the trees immediately.
Right. Yeah. If we don't include the trees in the capital improvement program, then that's when we get in trouble. So we'll try to capture it all. And I do have some pictures of that. This is out at the bocce courts. We're looking at putting in some more lighting out there, 3 poles, 6 lights to help out that. Eventually the wood's going to rot out, and we'll need to replace that too. This is one of those paths between the plaza and Hotel Yountville. It's asphalt. It's been slurry sealed. It's just getting old and rough and just needs to be replaced with. And we'll put in the colored concrete like at Vandeleur and Forester Park, which is for our new standard. This is a swimming pool. We've got lots of equipment out there, filters, heaters. So we've essentially created a list, and we'll start to knock it out.
On that one, I just want to clarify, under our operating agreement and partnership with the Veterans Home, the maintenance responsibility is all on the town.
Right. But it's an asset that we'll keep taking care of because everybody's enjoying it, right? This is the tennis court. Hard to see this picture, but there's a crack running along between these this side of the courts, and so it's a nice system that will come in and they'll seal the cracks, fill them up, and then put a surface on there. It should last, good 5 years. It's almost like overlaying a street, you might say, and then it'll be repainted. For the future projects, park development, new parks such as the open space on Oak Circle next to Hopper Creek. We have the replacement of the tennis courts. That may come up in the future. We have to actually go, like when we reconstruct a street, we may have to reconstruct the tennis courts. Pedestrian path between Oak Circle and Mission along Hopper Creek. This we're applying for grant funding. It's in the Regional Transportation Program with MTC. It's hard to say when we'll get the opportunity to apply for that. But it's on the list. We can take the project description and write into a grant application. So we, again, if there's opportunities out there for grants, then we try to be prepared for that. Next category is streets and transportation. On the agenda tonight was the street resurfacing project, which the council rejected the bids. We'll go back out and look at rebidding the slurry seal, doing some work with this sidewalk replacement traffic calming project as maybe a design build or something. So we did set aside the money in anticipation for the street resurfacing, which is mostly overlays. The slurry seal, we want to move it, continue at Mesa Court and Washington Park to slurry seal those. Streets were built in '97, so it's a good time to. It's kind of like painting your house. You want to, get those covered up and protected. And coming up on a future agenda will be the payment management program. We'll talk more about that. But that information for the payment management program was put in the capital improvement project, which then identifies the streets that we should be resurfacing or slurry sealing. And then the streetlight replacement program, on your agenda tonight, you approved the plans and specifications, so we'll go out to bid and come back in September to hopefully award that project. We've purchased the lights, so we don't have to wait for them as a long lead item. North Yountville Bike Route Project, just heard last week or so from Caltrans that we received the funding for the design, preliminary engineering work. So once we get their official obligation of funds document, then we'll authorize the consultant to proceed with the design there. The biggest cost there is going to be the path a concrete path from the intersection of Washington and Lincoln down into the park at the restrooms through the picnic ground area. Street restriping, this will be some center line stripes that are getting pretty old and faded. This is Fund 20, $640,000. A lot of this is gas tax money, but again, there is some grant money in here as well. This is out in Washington Park. I think it's on Forrester, and you can see these cracks starting to open up. And once the cracks open up, then the water gets in there, and cars and trucks drive over it. The pavement just gets brittle. It loses that asphalt binder, and then it just deteriorates from there. So it's much better to slurry seal these streets several times, and then eventually it would need to be overlaid. And it just it defers that reconstruction, which is a huge cost. It's like 100 times the cost of a slurry seal. This is Washington Street in front of Bellagio. Shows pictures of the street lights that will be replaced with the new standard. These were not retrofitted with LED street lights, so they have the old high pressure sodium. So we'll put in the new standard street lights. This is on Madison at Washington, looking west, and this intersection will be restriped with crosswalks. And with the R&D Kitchen project, putting in the bike path improvements, we should have good connections between the bike path along the highway and Veterans Memorial Park. And also, there'll be restriping of the bike lanes on Madison, Yountville Crossroad. For the future, we're looking at replacing railroad tie curbs and asphalt concrete sidewalks. There's several around town that are identified in the capital improvement program. There can be a maintenance issue. Trip and falls, and so on and so forth. So that's on the list. Surveys and monument book. There's some more description in the project description. I won't go into it here. Traffic and circulation plan. We have one. We'd like to update it every 5 to 10 years. So that's in the future budget proposal. Barrier rail replacements. There was one done on Fennell. The other locations that would be good is Hopper Creek at Washington, Jefferson, and Yount. They don't meet the current standards, and we'd like to design and construct those to meet the current standards. So again, this is a future project that we've identified. The question is, when does it move up in the priorities? Sidewalk on the South Washington. This is between Hotel Yountville and the Catholic Church. There's an open area without any sidewalks. People have asked about it. Essentially, it's on the list. We applied for grant funding, did not get the funding. So the question is, do you want to wait for development to come in to do the work, or does the town want to jump ahead and do it ahead of that potential development? And then regrading and repaving Weber west of Washington. This becomes a puddle every time it rains pretty much, and so what we want to do is to eliminate that ponding there. We could regrade the street and pave it, or if the hotel ever develops there on the vacant parcel, then we can have condition them to do it. So again, it gets into those things of, we've identified it, we can turn it into a condition of approval, or the town can go forward and construct it. Next category is water distribution. This is an enterprise fund, and this last year we replaced about 75 water meters, not the transmitters, but we can when they're broken. We could get about 200. These are good for about 10 to 15 years. With the sand problem we've had in our water system, they started to read slower, so they're not reading accurately, and so some weren't even reading at all. So we replaced those, and so we should get more accurate readings for those water meters at both residential and commercial. The water main and service lateral replacement, contractor started on Monday. We'll be working this week and maybe the next 2 weeks to get those replaced, depending on how quickly they move on North Washington. They're also working on the blow-off valves on 4 streets. They did quite a bit of work today, and so they're moving right along. And hydrant flushing, what we want to do is get the sand out of the transmission line between Rector Reservoir and town, and once that sand is removed, then we can move into the town distribution system, start moving the sand out of the distribution system. Once the sand's removed, then we want to get on an annual program of keeping those pipelines cleaned. $211,000 roughly of the total budget for Fund 60. This is what one of the residential water meters looks like. It just has it just spins as the water goes through it, and the transmitter sits on top and just does the recordings and sends it. Every 2 months we drive around and do a remote read and get the information. This is a crew working out on North Washington last year. This is what it'll probably look like next week or two. This is the crew out flushing the sand out of the pipeline on Madison at Jefferson, I believe. You can see the brown sand there in the front, and it takes quite a bit of water to get all the sand out of there, but it doesn't take much sand to stop up, faucets and even toilets. It's hard to believe that sand can be such a problem. So the town has been paying plumbers to go out and fix these problems in people's houses. For the future, we're looking at pressure pit upgrades. The transmission line from Rector Water Treatment Plant comes in at pretty high pressure, so the regulator pits regulate that pressure down for residential use and commercial use. These get old; they need to have replacement parts. Fire flow study project, looking at how are we doing on our fire flows for commercial development? Do we meet current fire code? And then a groundwater management plan, which we have, but we should be updating. So we want to look at that in the future for our emergency well. Another enterprise fund is our wastewater and water reclamation. There are two parts of this. There's the joint treatment plant part, and there's the collection and recycled water system part. So for the joint treatment plant equipment replacement program, these costs are all shared with the Veterans Home, 50-50 pretty much. We have some pumps and motors we were hoping to get replaced with the energy efficiency project, but didn't qualify because they considered it maintenance. So they have been purchased. We're out there going to get those replaced. Slurry seal at the treatment plant, we want to tie that into the other slurry seal project. And then the methane capture project is $131,000, part of the PG&E program, on-bill financing. Essentially, they give us $20,000, and our bill really doesn't go up when we're paying it back. So it's a really good deal. So $206,000 in Fund 63 for the total budget. On the other side of the enterprise fund is the collection system and the recycled water system. So we have the inflow and inflow reduction program. This is where we try to reduce the amount of groundwater and rainwater that get into the sewer system, which then needs to be treated at the treatment plant. So we're trying to reduce that. Main and lateral replacement program, this is just funding this year, so we're not actually doing a project, but putting aside the money for those pipes that can't be slip-lined but need to be replaced. And then recycled water project, $400,000 for this year. We've heard back from the state on the planning grant, looks favorable, and then we've just applied for the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, which was an agenda item tonight. So we're almost $500,000 in this budget for Fund 64. This is the video that the crew from Mixis has been around town. This isn't the actual one of our pipes, but a different one. You see the roots growing in here. Where the roots grow, the water also infiltrates. And then this was what it looks like after the repair. So they come in with like a plastic sock, and they blow it up, and they push it up against the outside of the pipe, and it keeps those roots and the groundwater from getting into the pipes. So they've been going around town and making these fixes. Remember the smoke testing last year. Now this is the next step to do video and repairs. These are some of the pumps and motors out at the treatment plant that eventually get old, wear out, inefficient, need to be replaced. This is the top of the digester, and methane gas is just venting out into the atmosphere. And if we can capture that, we can put it into the heaters, which heat up the digester and reduce our PG&E gas bill, and PG&E pays us $20,000 to do it, so it seemed like a good deal. This is one of the ponds as part of the recycled water system. With this feasibility study and environmental document, we want to look at bringing more customers, users, and their storage onto the system so we can recycle more water. For the future, we're looking at a SCADA system as part of the recycled water project at the treatment plant and at the ponds, but that can be expanded to the wastewater pump station, to the flood wall, to the water system, so we can start to automate and remotely monitor and make adjustments from the treatment plant or from home or your computer. So it's much easier instead of driving out across the valley to go fix change a pump or something. Dredging the wastewater ponds has been a long time since we've done that. We may even coordinate with St. Helena. They're doing something similar at this time, so maybe we can go in together and hire a contractor. And then the recycled water line to Veterans Memorial Park and the Vineyard Park. This is great in theory if we can use recycled water, reduce the amount of domestic water that we use. This will be studied in the feasibility study. Right now, the indications are not looking too favorable, but we'll get more information out of that study. But at least we're looking at it and evaluating it and making an informed decision. So in conclusion, there's been some changes from previous years. We've obtained $420,000 in grant funding, which is great to spend other people's money. Kathleen really likes that. We also have more water and wastewater projects because of new rates, and we're focusing on equipment replacement programs, vehicle replacement, and staff has found this to be consistent with the general plan, but our recommendation is for the town council to, in the resolution, find it consistent with the general plan. So with that, recommendation is take any public comments, review and discuss the proposed 5-year capital improvement program, and that concludes my report. I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council?
Well, I
Councilmember
do.
Dornbecker.
Sorry,
please.
I do have one, but it's sort of out of left field. I apologize. But now that it's become law that homes and office buildings and all buildings are required to have the carbon monoxide monitors, what would it take? I was asked this by one of our residents. What would it take for the town to put together a program for the town where we would negotiate the price of the, a bulk buy of these things and then sell them off at a reduced rate to some of our residents? Would that be a difficult thing to undertake?
I don't know about difficult. I don't know if Steve wants to jump in here. I mean, it's just one of those things that we haven't planned for.
Steve, go ahead.
I think there's several ways to approach this. One of which is, the first question would be, what objective and public policy purpose does the council have for asking for the program to be put together? Is it affordability issues? Is it, so I mean, we'd have to do some homework. Certainly, we can develop a program, but the product is currently available from a routine price of $22 for a plug-in to $85 or $100, depending on if you're buying a combined alarm system and require direct wiring. So I think my first inclination is it's certainly not. It's not a capital. It's not a CIP project because it's not a. It is not a. It's not a project that the town will own, manage, from a capital, in terms of a program, if you wanted to do that. But, I mean, I don't know, again, what your objective and what your criteria.
Well, it was affordability. It was an elderly person who asked this of me.
Mm-hmm. And, again, when you get into eligibility, what criteria and guidelines would the council have before we would enter into subsidizing that type of a private homeowner responsibility. So, I mean, if there was council interest, we could certainly look at putting a program together more. But if it's an occasional individual person, my suggestion is there are some of the county social service agencies that actually can provide some support for those folks that are doing that.
Thank you.
And just to follow on, there are programs in here. We've talked about solar panels. There are agencies, Berkeley I think comes to mind, that have really facilitated working with private property owners. We've heard some presentations tonight. So those are all things we can do. We're just trying to plan out with the capital improvement program, what's the plan for this year, what's the plan for 5 years. So, we're open to input, comments.
Well,
are there things that you want to add?
Congratulate you. This is really, it's amazing and so clearly laid out, so well done.
Thank you. But
Any other questions of staff about this before I invite the public to comment? Councilmember Moeller?
Yeah, I think this is a question. I also agree that, this is a statement, but it's going to lead to a question, that this is really great. I think the problem that I see, and I want to know what you guys can think of, is that we learn this sitting here, and we know a lot about it doing budgeting, but I don't think we get the word out. And people are always thinking, what are they going to do with those streetlights, or when are they going to fix my street? What about, have you got any thoughts on how this can get communicated in a better fashion than we're doing now?
Well,
I think it's great.
Yeah. Well, Public Works is, we always feel taken for granted, that nothing, unless the water line breaks or something, we're just sort of out there doing our jobs. So we're not in the business of, public relations and going out and tooting our own horn. But we do have the newsletter. I mean, there's other options. We try to get the notice to residents out before the water line project or the resurfacing. We have the web page. So there's some things, but I would probably defer to the town manager on what his thoughts are.
I think
promotion?
Our challenge is we need to continue to do the same education and outreach. And this product is an improving product, and we will continue to improve the reader usability and the information. We do need to draw more people to it. You know, we need to get it on the website. We need to do a brief summary. We need to do some press releases. But it is challenging. And I've had individual conversations with people that come in, and then they leave relatively pleased knowing that at least there's a process. Because as you'll know on some of these, there's a big asterisk to my whole comment, which is it's all depending on funding. And not all of our projects are currently funded or funded at the level that the council or the community necessarily would like to see achieved. But I do think we have to continue working on that. We tried also to make ourselves available to speak at community groups and some things, and then maybe we'll try to put a little road show together to do something. You know, if the mobile home communities or citizen groups want, you know, we can try and talk about it, because I do think we don't get credit for the planning, and you know, some of this is a fluid process, but at least it lets people know that we're thinking about it. You know, there is a game plan, and in our case, the council and staff have made some real significant improvements on trying to identify appropriate funding sources, which are going to help us do more, you know, especially in the water and wastewater, where our new system replacement fees are going to go towards covering and addressing not only the next 5 years, but longer term. It also frees up other general fund money that's therefore in the capital projects fund can be used for some of your parks and streets and other civic facilities. So I don't know. I would encourage the council to also, whatever help and ideas you have on how, excuse me, how to improve our message delivery, we are certainly willing to try that, because whether it's the CIP budget, whether it's our regular operating budget, we are, you know, we've got a lot of information in different formats, and we just got to do a better job of getting it out. And clearly, with the large attendance in tonight's public discussion, we know that, I guess, part of it is maybe there's some acceptance, but part of it, I think, is just an apathy or a general lack of awareness, and have to keep working on that.
Vice Mayor, you had a question?
Well, I think you mostly answered my question. When I first looked through this, and Kathleen, this is a numbers thing too, so I really like the way we've presented these overall sheets, and it talks about what our existing fund balance is, and then the 5 years, and then the total cost of those. And then we have now the unfunded, which says, hey, we don't even, like, this is off to the backside. What I first thought was, we had a fund balance, we had all the different things, it told us what our total cost was, and what was unfunded was that last column. So my question is, and I think you answered it, a lot of this stuff, even though it's not in the unfunded column, is still unfunded? Is that correct?
Well, let me explain.
So do we have a reasonable expectation that the things that are on this 5 years, we have the money to do? Because I know we have been lax in our funding of capital project funds.
This is what staff is going to be further evolving when it comes to years 2, 3, 4, and 5. We are trying to match up the expenditures with what we believe the reasonable revenue projections will be. This is where you're going to see, you know, this year you saw a lot more detail from the prior in terms of where we could be spending the money and what the project. The next area of real evolution and focus, especially now that we have the change in rates, is to do more time on trying to identify and line up the funding in each of the various areas with their source to see if years 2, 3, 4, and 5 are accurate. And there's some variables in there. And so, I mean, our hope is yes. I mean, in a perfect world, our hope is that we present the budget this year and we're introducing the refinement in what I call years 2, 3, 4, and 5, what may be moving the priorities, or if there's some new funding or new projects that haven't been identified. But really there should be, my hope is that as we get going, there's really never a surprise in what we call the current year, because you've seen it before. You know, you've seen it 2, 3, 4 times, and you keep working it down. So when you approve your annual budget, you're familiar. Obviously, a project that's identified in year 5 still has a lot of fluidity in terms of moving parts and cost estimates. I will tell you right now, we still have some cleanup on our cost projections. I mean, a simple illustration that we need to refine is a lot of our equipment, pickup trucks are placed at the replacement value of $15,000 based on 2009 estimates, and that price is not quite accurate. So we've still got some evolutions where we tweak it and do the adjustments every year so that we don't carry a bad number. And I use that as an illustration. We continue to carry $15,000 for a replacement cost, and when you go to buy it, it's $19,000. Then we're not quite achieving our goal for having the CIP. But those are, I think, an enhancement of where we're going at, and I'm very pleased with the work that we're doing. But no, just because, I will say the short answer to your question is, just because there's a $20,000 plug-in in the year 2020 does not mean that that's a guarantee that that project will occur in 2020.
If I could go on, Vice Mayor Chilton, there is some money that comes in every year, gas tax, and so we know roughly $65,000 a year for gas tax. But what the payment management program says is, well, we should be spending $145,000. So then it brings the question to the council, okay, do you want to spend the extra money, or what's the consequence of that? Then the other thing is, the big picture. Okay, you got the whole capital improvement program. We have a balance, I believe, about $350,000. So you can't seismic retrofit the town hall, which costs $7 million. So then do you do outside financing or loans, or what are the options? And so what I'm hoping to get to next year is to say, okay, well, this is the range of possibilities. This is how much they'll cost, and then how do we want to prioritize? So is parks more important than streets versus something else? So that's we always want your input. We're always looking for input from the public. I went to the Parks and Community Services Commission to get their input. What are they thinking? So we're always. I keep a list, and I just keep adding to it. Over the years. So if there's any ideas, we want to capture it and then prioritize it, and that's where you're setting the policy. We want to get your prioritization. So if this is staff's recommendation, but if you have something else, then we'd like to hear about it.
That's a good segue for me inviting any members of the public who would like to speak about our plan.
Not in.
I'm going to just wait in case they're on their way. Okay, I'm not going to wait anymore. So let's bring the discussion back for any final comments or potential action. Any final comments, or is there an action to be taken about accepting?
I just have
the
a couple
program?
comments.
Member Hall.
First of all, I mean, any good budget and any good plan requires that you put things up on the board and work around them. So, and this is an ambitious plan. There's a lot of things in here that if you didn't put out there, 2 years from now, you'd come to us and we'd look at you very strangely and say, well, why didn't we know about this? These are things that are long-term, big moving items, and they're obvious in some cases, and they're not obvious in others. And I take to heart the comment about, the message being lost, if you will, in the community. And I don't agree with that, and maybe I'm naive in my own little world I live in, but I recognize, and I think I would say most people in this community recognize that, where we live is not Napa or other communities in this area that don't have streets with potholes and sidewalks and things like that. So I do think many or most of the residents recognize what a good effort, or what a tremendous effort you and your team put in place. That being said, this is very ambitious. I think it is consistent with what we put forth in the general plan. So I recognize that, but you cannot in the long term plan for something that you don't start to anticipate and put in front of people early enough, because we've got to start, as you indicated, prioritizing what the appropriate things for us to identify and to what projects to undertake looking forward. And a 5-year capital plan is great. I know companies, very large companies, that actually do 10, 15, and 20-year capital plans because they've got enormous projects. And some of those that come to mind are companies like Boeing, when they're building the 777s. That was a 30 or 40-year project. So as an enterprise, the town should be looking at those types of planning. I'm not saying there's a crystal ball and you never will have one. The mayor made a very smart and astute comment about, we have to have funds available to be able to take care of the sidewalks and things on an immediate nature when they become an issue, and you can't plan for all of those pitfalls either. But this kind of a general plan, or the CIP that you put forth, again, it's very ambitious. I would encourage the community to review it. Everybody's neighborhood is impacted to some extent, or could be impacted to some extent, and their participation and understanding of it is critical, because they benefit from all the work that you're doing. And I don't think necessarily the message is lost, because I think we all live it, breathe it, enjoy it every day that we live in this community. But it's very helpful. It's easy to read. And I think in the long term, it'll allow us to make the decisions and help the community prioritize what we need to have happen in the town. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Moeller, any comments?
It's, again, a big concern of mine. I know that we've got kind of a soft plan, but as it directly relates to this, I'm really looking for a really solid plan for getting funding back into our CIP. We've really used up a lot of it. I know we've got some funds here and there, but these are all important things to us, and it just seems to be a mismatch right now. And I know I brought it up before, and Steve is not going on deaf ears, because I know he supports that too. But I think it's really going to be a real critical thing for us kind of moving forward. How do we really get the funds, to Councilmember Hall's point as well, back in here to take care of it? So those are my comments.
Thank you. Councilmember Dornbecker?
Well, I think that we should have a marching band and really get out there and tell everybody what a great public works department we have. Now, I think a lot of people really do appreciate, even though it's unspoken, how, in what good condition the town, the parks, the streets. I hear that all the time. So I would love to see us be in a better financial position, so that we could, identify ahead of time the capital improvement projects we could do now for next year. That'd be, delightful. But anyway, I think you're doing a wonderful job with what you got, and I'll be asking you questions.
Okay.
Vice Mayor?
Yeah, I'll generally agree with all the comments I've heard. And over the years, I think my main concern, which you all are clearly in progress as being seen addressing, is I always felt like years ago that the CIP was just an absolute laundry list of everything that anybody in town ever wanted to happen, and it created the impression that everybody should expect all of those things to happen. And even having the very last column, the quote-unquote unfunded, I think that's a bit of a misnomer, because there's more that's unfunded, column to say, we acknowledge this, but we don't even see this in the next 5 years, I think is important. And I really believe that next step of saying, okay, we have these listed, are we really going to be able to do this? And as others have said, what is that, if we want to call it an unfunded liability, what money do we need out there to make sure our streets don't have potholes 5 years or 10 years down the line? So I'm encouraged to hear that you are continuing to think in that direction, and then that planning is obviously something that we are improving on and working on. So I'll continue to look forward to that. So thank you.
Yeah, I would agree that it is important that we continually get the message out that these are not all projects that are happening that have money associated with them. I know that it sounds like we say it to ourselves over and over again, because we do, but you never know when a new set of ears is listening to that message, that this is not, in 100% of these projects are committed to financially or even on the schedule. But I do think that we've learned time and again how critical it is to have shovel-ready projects, to have a plan, to be able to adapt that plan, but to not have a plan at all would be, I think, much more detrimental to how we organize and then fund. I think looking at the trees we talked about earlier is just another example. We responded to a capital improvement issue on Washington Street with tree removal that we were able to merge and save costs by merging it with the tree maintenance schedule. it's that kind of thing that the general public doesn't recognize. We understand that, but we'll continue to try to make them aware of those positive opportunities. But I do think, even though it can be misleading, I think it's really important that we do have this long-term projection of projects that we identify as needed. I think it's also important, as you list the priorities on these, some of these issues are low priority, and they may get bumped from year to year to year. And I recognize that, and that's fine. We also see the mandatory or the high priority items that, whether they be because of land use, development, scheduling, or state requirements, whatever it might be, it helps people who take the time and bother to look at this to understand what the master plan is. It's hard to get the overall picture if you look just at an individual project here and there, but if people do take the time, and I think it's a very thorough, well-presented program, that it can be one of those light bulb moments where people kind of get what the planning's all about. So I would reiterate the kudos for putting the plan and the program in such a readable, transparent format. And we continue to, the programs evolve. Mm-hmm. We've seen that. You've made note of what has changed. It's not set in concrete or pavers or whatever else. So anyway, those are my summary comments. Is there any action to be taken?
I'd like to, would you like a motion for
I
a
would.
resolution?
I would love a motion.
Okay. I would like to make the motion then to recommend approval of resolution number 2980-11, finding the town's 5-year capital improvement program consistent with the general plan and approving for fiscal years 2012 through 2016.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. That is unanimous. Thank you once again, Graham and staff. On to item 10C, consider scheduling special joint town meeting between the town council and zoning and design review board. And I believe that, are you going to come forward, Sandra? Oh, you're not going to sit back there this whole time and not join us, are you?
Yes, over the last couple of meetings, the ZDRB has brought to staff some concerns, primarily, and ideas that they have for potential amendments to the ordinance around the Old Town Historic Zoning District in particular. Some of these ideas are still formative, and staff thought that it would be a good idea to engage both the council and the ZDRB in a joint session to discuss some of the ZDRB's notions and ideas about these amendments. So we were suggesting a September 2nd, is it? 6th, sorry. 6th meeting for a joint meeting, and that's a
Tuesday.
It's our
regular town council meeting.
Yeah, regular scheduled date. Okay.
Right. And just from some follow-up policy, as you know, we've had some discussions about the fact that how does the council improve communications with its advisory bodies? And we've had some discussions in our planning sessions about the fact that it could be appropriate for the council to meet with all of its boards and commissions on an annual basis. One, because they are an advisory body, and how do they make sure that they check in and feel, and then of late, as Bob and Sandra are identifying, there's some interest perhaps in doing some stuff, and before a lot of people go down a path working on something, it might want to make sure that the council has a shared interest and supports that. Or maybe there's some direction that you'd like to give to some of your advisory bodies. The challenge that we would try to work with is also scheduling a later one with your Parks and Community Services, so we would hope to make this a regular thing once a year with each of your appointed commissions.
And the proposal is during our regular council meeting, and so there be notice to that effect so the public would be aware of that?
It would be a jointly agendized, it would be a council meeting and a ZDRB meeting. We'll have to have I think we'll set a time specific during the council meeting so that everybody knows. And it obviously would be a discussion type format. There would be an agenda with some discussion and parameters so that it's not, unscripted, open mic. But we'd work on a format for that, and we'd have to obviously, staff will have to sit down and figure out a configuration for the council chambers that is appropriate for engaging the dialogue between the commission members, the council, staff, and the public. So that'll be something new for us.
Is there the potential, or can we make it explicit that there is no potential for any action on any particular issues? You mentioned the ZDRB specifically was talking about Old Town commercial ordinances. What I'm trying to get at is, should the public be informed that there is no possibility that there will be changes to any Old Town zoning in that discussion?
I think, classic of anything we start with any feedback and direction is all that is going to come out of that. In other words, is there interest in perhaps them working on some of the issues they have? The council may say, or they may say, well, go work on a draft and bring that back and work it through, or what are some of the issues that the council feels perhaps ZDRB, if they're interested in doing, might work. Again, we know from the council's strategic plan, when you go back, and remember, we do need to use the strategic plan because that is supposed to help guide where our resources, both staff and fiscal, are going. The council's identified working on a historical program is a high priority. So if there's some stuff related to the Old Town, that may meet some of that. But, it will not, like I say, be unscripted, and there's no definitive action. You're going to have a dialogue.
We're going to welcome public engagement in the discussion.
Absolutely. And, again, any product that would come out of that is actually going to be, when Bob talks about something being in a formative stage, we're really talking about concepts, discussion, potential work plan. We do not want this as something that's being brought by the ZDRB as a finished product. It's a dialogue. Right. It's a discussion.
Did the town attorney want to chime in? It looked like you were...
Well, yes, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. In response to the question of whether or not any action could be agendized, and because it would be a special meeting, you couldn't introduce or adopt any ordinances at that time. You certainly could give direction to staff to follow up and present a report at a future date.
Very good. Thank you. Is there any other discussion with council or any member of the public who isn't here would like to comment? They would like to propose an action to accept this recommendation that we have a joint meeting with the ZRB at our next council meeting, or at least the council meeting on September 6th?
I agree.
Would you like to? You don't need a formal motion for this?
No.
Okay. We agree.
Thank you.
And that will be the normal 6 p.m. start time, as far as we know?
Yes.
So 6 p.m., September 6th. A part of the regular town council meeting will be a workshop discussion with the Zoning and Design Review Board. Very good. Thank you for the recommendation, and thank you to the ZRB for that discussion. Let's move on to item 11, staff informational reports. Do we have anything of specific interest?
We do have a couple items to share. I will go first with one. There was a regional discussion held on Monday afternoon related to Napa County's animal shelter, the costs of the program and various things, and which probably led to Mr. Lederer's comment earlier, because I was a little bit direct, although we're not the only ones. There are some concerns, as the council expressed, so I anticipate that there will be an ongoing conversation about alternatives. We are suggesting that it get added to the shared services consolidation and doing something different box. I will share with you that that will be challenging, because there are also support and community-based groups that are very attached to the animal shelter and the consequences. But the city of Napa also had a very shared feeling, consider are about the same as this council's, and they fund about 60% of the bill. So if they're evaluating whether they're wanting to do or stay in, or what the consequences are if they don't, then that could have a potential ripple effect. So I just wanted to report that you had asked us to start working on a dialogue and doing that, and that is moving forward.
Very good, thank you.
I have two items. There's an article in the Sun, notices have gone out, but just want to remind people to avoid North Washington Street with the water line work. There'll be traffic control, so between Madison and Hopper Creek over the next week or two, or at least this week, probably next week, and possibly another third week, but we're hoping to get done in 2 weeks. The other item on North Washington is PG&E finished their work on removing the wires and poles today. They still have some connection work to do probably in the vaults, and then it's not a promise, but AT&T said that in about next 2 weeks to a month, they should be removing their wires and removing their poles. So hopefully that project will be finished. We really pushed PG&E to get done sooner, and it's been months, and it's frustrating.
April comes to mind.
Yes. But we'll just try to keep in communication with PG&E on projects like this and keep them moving as quickly as possible so it doesn't get into the summer busy season.
We'll strive for the Yountville Days Parade.
Well, and there is a regulator pit project coming that they will be finished before Yountville Days, the one by Vandeler Park. But you'll hear more about that later.
Very good. Any other staff reports? No? Seeing none. Council meeting reports. We'll start with meeting reports. Councilmember Moeller.
Meeting reports, yes. June 27th, the Upper Waste Valley Waste Agency met, and there was a 3-to-1 vote to approve garbage rate increases of 6%. The same number of votes, 3-to-1, to approve a 1.5% increase in the Clover Flat landfill tipping fee. So if you take some stuff up there, the rates are going up. As part of that meeting, we had a very good discussion about, how we really pick up our waste and drive it around, and, maybe we have some different options to look at. And I think it's started a very good dialogue. So there'll be lots of stuff that we'll be talking about in the next couple months, and maybe some recommendations later we can bring back to council for their consideration. We also, Steve and I also met with Steve Letterly and David Briggs, who are the county staff, yesterday, and we started working through page by page the franchise agreement that was first established in '92, which is what we're still bound by, and it doesn't expire until 2025. But we'll be bringing back more detail, but we're working through the details right now. I'd also like to just mention on the library, we got some information that came out, when was this? Late June, that the Yountville Library circulation has increased almost 30% from the last fiscal year, which was '08 and '09, where the library was open full-time. Well, full-time to Yountville, whatever that is. So I think that's really great. It really shows a pretty significant improvement in our checkout. And then just one other comment I wanted to bring up for the council consideration for agendizing at a later date is that Yountville's 50th birthday will be coming up in 2015. And considering that we've just approved our 2011-2012 budget, I'd like to suggest that, maybe we could talk about getting an ad hoc committee with council members or people, that are in the public, businesses, to start planning some events and activities, because that's going to take a while to do that. And then once they plan those activities, we'll have time when they bring the budget. We need to put a budget together for that and get into one of our budget cycles and maybe into a T-bid budget cycle asking for money. So it just doesn't seem too early, perhaps, to get started on a discussion like that.
Good job.
Big party.
For a long
Party.
period of time.
Yes.
The whole year, I think, is acceptable. Thank you for the meeting report. Councilmember Dornbecker, you have a meeting report?
Well, I was just going to mention that I met with Dennis Kreimeier, the head of the City and County Library, and we had a very good meeting. And then I followed up with a meeting with Marjorie and Linda Cantillion, who is on the commission, and we're very encouraged that we will be bringing some news about but the process is moving forward, and I think that we're going to reach a good conclusion with the library.
Meaning potentially more hours.
Potentially more hours. And also, I wanted to say that Linda Cantillion has been very successful in working with the commission and has been working on the art in the library. So we're working towards that as well.
Very good. No meeting report? The one meeting report I have is from the Napa Valley Flood Control. We did meet last week and approved a Rutherford Reach Zone Assessment, which has been an ongoing assessment for that area up in Rutherford. There was also kind of a big warning given to all of us about a statewide stormwater coalition that is being formed to respond to a potential state mandate for significantly more complex permit requirements that will result in cost increases and scheduling delays. Where have we heard those two things before when it comes to state mandates? So Napa County is paying attention. We were alerted by, trying to think which county it was that kind of put up the red flag initially. But anyway, it's something that would be of great concern that individual local governments would be required to work through a much more cumbersome permit process for stormwater. So anyway, that's something that we'll continue to monitor. Any specific comments from folks? I've got a few that maybe I'll just touch on, and then if you want to follow up. First of all, it seems like it was a long time ago, but 4th of July fireworks, once again, were quite spectacular. You can just tell by the number of people that come from all over the valley that it's really a very fun culmination of a great day. Festivities all day long up at the Veterans Home. Had a beautiful day. I didn't hear very many sirens, which is always a good sign. Hopefully it was a safe and sane 4th for everybody. I'd also like to announce hopefully people have seen the banners for our Mystery Writers panel that's coming up this Sunday. And I want to thank Nancy Gates in particular, but also the entire Yountville Arts Committee for helping me organize this. It's only taken about a year, but from starting at 4:30 on Sunday, we're going to have a reception with 3 noted authors that specialize in mysteries, and they'll be here for live music, wine reception, and then we're going to hold a panel discussion and talk to them, and people are invited to come and ask their questions about what it's like to be a writer, how do they find their ideas, how do they develop their characters, so be it. So the public is welcome to come 4:30 to meet the writers, the 3 writers, and also just enjoy some music, and you know how we normally do it here in this town, a little food, a little wine, a little live music. This on the heels of what I had one neighbor describe it was the best community event she has ever attended here in town, which was the installation of our new sculpture, Chaos Pamplona. And the discussions have already begun. People love it, people don't love it, anywhere in between. I do want to give a very special recognition to Samantha and to Steve, who for a year plus, at least about a year, have worked tirelessly to help coordinate this with several different entities. Michael Polensky, one of our local business owners, was also instrumental in starting the relationship with the artist and the benefactor with the town of Yountville. So it's really an impressive addition to our community to have such an internationally acclaimed artist and piece of art here. And it was a fantastic day in partnership with Festival del Sol. We even had a little bonus with the Russian National Orchestra Brass Quintet. Showed up. We didn't know they were coming, but they knew they were coming. And so it really was a great day. We had some really good support from Vintage Estates with food and some local wine producers. So thank you to the community and everyone that helped make that day and that whole experience happen. And now we get to continue to enjoy that addition to our art walk. So those were the items that I wanted to touch on. Any other announcements or comments from the council? No. Let's see. With that, we will move on to just note future agenda items. We'll be getting our public safety quarterly reports and a visit from John Tudor to talk about the proposed redistricting and boundary adjustments. We'll certainly welcome the public to come and hear that presentation, potentially even ask some questions. This is based on the new 2010 federal census. People have probably heard we're looking at potential changes not only to our local districts but also in our congressional districts. So it's going to impact all of us, so hopefully people will be paying attention. Dan, do we have any closed session tonight? Looks like no.
No, we do not.
Then if there's nothing else, we will move to item 15, adjournment to our next regular scheduled meeting, which is August 2nd.
So moved. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all very much, and good night.